Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the July 7th, 2020 Town of East Hampton Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. We have a full agenda this evening. We're going to be starting off with 3 public hearings, and then we have some other business to take care of. Before we get going, I wanted to mention that board member Joan Morgan McGivern has stepped down from the Zoning Board of Appeals. So I expect the town board will be working towards filling that vacancy. We certainly appreciate Joan's service to the town of East Hampton, and we appreciate working with her on the Zoning Board of Appeals, and we wish her all the best in the future. So we'll get going with our first scheduled public hearing this evening. The applicant is Max Honerkamp. The lot size and location is 32,144 square feet total at 59 Northwest Landing Road, East Hampton, tax map number 300-90-3-20. Description is to construct a 284 square foot pool deck addition within 100 feet of freshwater wetlands. The relief sought a natural resources special permit pursuant to section 255-4-20 and one variance of 40 feet from section 255-4-40 to allow the construction of an addition to a pool deck 60 feet from a wetland where 100 feet is required and any other relief necessary from the East Hampton Town Code. This is in an A2 residential district. The flood zone is X and AE6 flood zone, and the secret class is type 2. And council, do we have a proper affidavit of service and posting?
First, let me find out if our applicant is with us. Mr. Honerkamp, are you?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, you are with us. Just
Yep.
want to make sure you were present.
Yeah.
Yes, I have received the affidavit of service and posting. Both mailings and posting on the property were done on June 26th, so the paperwork appears to be in order.
Okay, thank you, council. Okay, this is in board member Brenneman's East Hampton district, and Tim has a field report for us, I believe. Tim, if you would.
Yeah, thank you, John, and bear with me as I share my screen here.
We're all getting pretty techy.
Okay, can you see it?
It'll probably come up, might take a second.
All right, let me try that again.
Maybe you have to unshare your screen, or I don't know.
It usually takes a while. It does take a while.
No luck?
No luck.
This was working just a minute ago.
Yeah,
But it's coming now.
there we go. Perfect.
Okay, very good. Apologies for the delay. I drove by the property yesterday, and as you can see, the property was properly posted. Just took a look to the north along Northwest Landing Road, and then swung back around to the south. I think the board members are familiar with this location, which this leads out to Northwest Harbor. Okay, so now I've just started to walk into the driveway, and I'm actually looking at the house and the pool. So you can see that it's well shielded by white pines. Now I've walked down the driveway a little bit farther, and I'm looking at the pool, again between the white pines. Walked all the way to, I'm actually at the corner of the house at this point, looking back east, back out toward the road, so you can see what it looks like heading out to the road from the pool. Now I've gone to the opposite end of the pool, so you get a sense for the orientation to the pool, to the house. and then I walk over to the side, and this really depicts the area that the proposed addition would be placed right along this area in front of the house. Now I've walked toward the back of the property, which would be west, looking along the back side. I wanted to picture this in the next couple of pictures. Board members, if you looked at Elaine's proposed sketch for some re-veg, it would really be starting around this area in the back, and then you'll see it in the next photo. So this is now looking north along the west border, and the proposal is for a narrow area of re-veg along there. Now heading back toward the north, and now looking back toward the west, so looking toward the back of the property. And again, this would be the general area that Elaine sketched out for proposed additional re-veg right along in this area. I then went back out to the road, went across the road and looked, tried to get a view of what the house and or the pool would look like from the road, just to finish this off. And that, I believe, is the end of my report. And I will attempt to stop sharing.
Okay, thank you, Tim, for that. Board members, any questions for Tim? No. Okay. Okay, seeing none, so we will move on. I believe, Mr. Honekamp, we have you on the line.
Yes.
Good evening. And
hey,
good evening. If you are not an attorney, I will have to swear you in. Are you an attorney?
I am not.
Okay, if you could raise your right hand, and do you swear and affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Okay, good evening, and this is your time to shine.
All right. So yeah, I mean, I got the house last year and noticed that it was kind of tight around the deck area, and it's kind of limits in the enjoyment, and also I think the safety of enjoying the pool. You know, grew up here, plan to hopefully have a family here at some time, and you know, I imagine little kids running around that area, and it just seems kind of tight to allow enjoyment there. Just, you know, you could see in one of those photos how, you know, the lounge chairs have to kind of be stacked there to even just have two. There's a small table. So I just thought that that was something that would improve the enjoyment and the safety of the outdoor living space. And I wanted to obviously build, you know, do it in a way that was as far away from the wetlands as possible. So, you know, building just to the edge of the house, I think cosmetically will look great. And obviously from the street, it still will be pretty shielded. So I don't think it'll affect the character of the neighborhood that much. And yeah, so that's kind of why I wanted to look into getting a larger deck there. You know, I'd plant, you know, some of the boards on the deck need replacement, so I probably was going to replace just the top boards, and wanted to wait to see if this was possible before I did that. So, yeah, that's, I mean, I'm obviously new to this, so I'm not sure what else I need to say. If there's any other questions.
Sure. Mr. Honekamp, did you have a chance to review the planning department's technical analysis memo?
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm interested in your reaction to the recommendation for revegetating portion of your property.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm obviously understand that situation and want to do what's best for, I know I'm in a special part of the, you know, the town, and want to do what's right. But yeah, I was a little surprised considering, you know, I just got the house, you know, probably within 12 months of when the analysis was completed. and that saw that there was that much that was cleared that was approved in the C of O from the previous owner. And, obviously, plan to do whatever is right, but I just wanted to I was kind of curious what types of leniency in terms of timing to revegetate, or if there's any type of, someone can work with me to do the, because I don't want to, I bought the property expecting to be what it is, and clearly it was over cleared. So I am a little, want to do it in the best way so I can kind of get as most of, there's parts of the house, the yard that I don't use as much. So I wouldn't mind going over that area instead of potentially some areas that I do use. So I was wondering if there's someone that could help me, since, it wasn't my error in doing that. And then also in terms of the timing of it, obviously with what's going on with COVID and everything, my main business is pretty much closed right now. So compared to what we normally do. So obviously financially things are not the same. And, I know it can get kind of expensive to potentially revegetate. So any leniency in terms of maybe letting it naturally revegetate, or some, guidance on helping to do it the right way. I know I've seen, it's obviously a lot of deer in the area, and I know that revegetating with certain species might be difficult with the deer population down there. So I've also heard from friends that it might be better to potentially build or go for bigger trees than more trees. But yeah, if there's any type of leniency in terms of timing, I know it should have already been done, but since it should have been done by the previous owner, because I think he in 2006 had it cleared properly, cleared it in between selling to me, and then it was approved as a C of O. So I just, any leniency that the board could give me would be great.
So Max, maybe I'll just jump in for a second, and we'll be hearing from the planner, from Eleni. And just to answer your question, I think the planning department, and especially Eleni, who's your planner on this, can be very helpful to you.
Okay.
I think we understand exactly what you just said. And I think they're very good at picking out native species that are deer resilient. They can really give you some good guidance and keep you on a budget as well. And as well, I know I spoke to Eleni. I think there was an issue, to your point, there was an issue where some of this was misinterpreted by the previous building inspector. So you kind of unfortunately got kind of caught in a glitch there. So
Right.
I think they can really work with you, and I think Eleni and the planning department is recommending some flexibility as far as where you do the revegetation, because you are basically surrounded by wetlands. So I think that could happen, and there's a chance that perhaps if your project is approved by this board, in the conditions, instead of having it revegetated before you get the building permit, perhaps it could be revegetated as you build the deck, so that when you go to get your kind of final certificate of compliance, you can have it all pulled together. That'll give you time to get buy the plants and some of that. So the board might be amenable to that as well. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. No, yeah, just because I, obviously didn't expect it. And, when I bought the house, I kind of put most of my money into just getting in here, because I'm, was 30 years old at the time. So just to kind of be hit with something would be difficult. I'll make do, because I don't want to, I've been part of this town my family has for my whole life. So I envision being here for a while. So want to do what's right. And I know it's a special part of the area. And I don't know if, even if I were to, I know it's premature maybe to say this, but any building project would probably be after the winter. I don't want to do anything right at the moment. So just wanted to mention that.
Okay, good. So we will hear from
I'd like to make a comment. Yeah, I'd like to make a comment about the re-veg and the wetlands. Mr. Harnekamp,
Yep.
The wetlands as described by Eleni, the planner, you have some of the best native plantings and best plants that could possibly be found in a wetland, very high quality wetland. And so think about that with the revegetation. Do you give some additional protection to that and have other species?
Okay.
I would love to have a wetland like this.
Yeah. Thank you.
Board members, I didn't mean to cut off Terry there. Any other questions for the applicant right now? Board members? No?
No, not me, John.
I would just point out to Max that he's asking for a substantial variance. So this board would typically require some form of mitigation. And the fact that he's in an area that has such a rich quality of wetlands, I actually think what the board, the planning department is recommending is very reasonable for this particular project. It's a 40% variance, so that's, by most definitions, substantial. So I think we can find a happy place here, but we're not trying to be difficult. That's the reason why the planning department is making that request.
Right.
Thank you.
I think I was under the impression that regardless, I'd probably have to do the revegetation too. So.
Yeah.
Yes, and thank you, Tim. Yes, and I think we all certainly agree. A 40% variance is certainly substantial. Okay, if there are no further questions, we'll hear from the planning department. Eleni, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Great. Good evening, Eleni.
Good evening.
I guess I'll swear you in for the evening, Eleni, if you please.
Okay.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. I will share my screen if that's okay, if it works. Okay, so you can see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so I have the property here. So this is where the deck extension would be going. So I just wanted you to be able to see that while I'm speaking. So the planning department does not have a strong opinion about the extension of the decking due to the fact that the construction will occur on the opposite side of the current pool. And there are currently improvements between the wetland and the proposed deck addition. The board should consider that although this project poses a low risk to the associated wetland, it is located within an environmentally sensitive area and the wetlands are high quality. The wetland has actually significantly expanded in the past, 18 to 20 years. And should be noted that previously in 2004, when the pool was constructed, it did not require a variance. So the wetlands at that time had kind of come across back here. Now they come up as well. So in 2004, if the applicant were to have constructed this deck, then it would not have required a variance. The wetland is listed as a DEC regulated Class 1 freshwater wetland. It mostly consists of high quality tupelo swamp, and they're directly connected to an extensive tidal marsh that is an important tributary to Northwest Creek, which you can kind of see over here. And the property is also located within the Northwest Scenic Area of statewide significance. The property is adjacent to Suffolk County Parkland, so this all here is Suffolk County Parkland. It's about 228 acres of protected open space. As far as the clearing is concerned, it is overcleared, so we are recommending revegetation or to be allowed to revegetate. The applicant did obtain a CO in 2019 before purchasing the property, and there was an error in the surveyor's calculations, which is what led to the CO being issued, even though it was overcleared. So that's kind of where the problem came in. And it would be 1,324 square feet of revegetation that would be needed. That's the overclearing amount. And the planning department would be comfortable with it being kind of anywhere because this property is surrounded on 3 sides by wetlands. So it comes across here, up here, and there are wetlands across the street as well. So kind of anywhere on the property where a re-veg could take place would be adequate. And if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, Eleni, could you point out exactly where the wetlands are in relation to this project? Because
Sure,
I did not see it on our survey.
So the wetlands, I'll pull up the survey as well. So the wetland line, this is actually the wetland line right here. So it comes across the back of the property and then it turns and comes up.
Okay, all right.
And then turns away here. And then there's an additional wetland across the street. That's about 180 feet. So it's out of NRSP jurisdiction on across the street side, but there is wetlands on that
But the
side.
surveyor did not give us the exact measurement to the addition.
No, we measured that off ourselves.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Eleni, just as curiosity, you know what has contributed to the increase in the wetlands in this area?
It's probably just the area itself. I mean, it is associated with Northwest Creek, so it could be, sea level rise. The area itself maybe was mixed at the time in 2004, and it's just as, there's a high groundwater table, and as it got wetter, the wetland vegetation moved in. It's just a growing wetland.
Okay.
And last question, you would be willing to work with the applicant to figure out the best, or at least an acceptable revegetation plan with the application. Isn't that correct?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, thank you, Eleni. Any other questions, board members, for Eleni on this?
No, thank you.
Okay, so do we have anyone? I think we may have someone on the line. Mike, do we have?
Yes, John, there is one caller right now. I will unmute them. One moment.
Thank you.
Hello, caller. You're live with the ZBA. Could you state your name, please? Hello, caller. Are you there?
I think it's just Max again. Should I hang up?
No, no.
Oh, you can stay on.
Okay.
You stay on.
Okay.
Hearing nothing. There are no other callers.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Mike. Okay, Tim, I guess, are we all set? Max, do you have anything else? I think we understand.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's basically it. I mean, I'm willing to work with you guys, obviously. Not trying to do anything that's not allowed. And, I think it's not a huge addition to that, but I know it's very close to growing wetland. So I'm fully aware whatever your decision is, what it is. But yeah, I just think that, especially if I'm losing all the some of my yard that I thought was my yard, which shouldn't have been my yard, that having at least one area outside with the deck around the pool would be nice to have to enjoy the outside area and obviously make it safer. And that's pretty much it.
Okay. Okay. Thank you very much, Max. Thank you.
All right. And that's it. Or should I stay on?
Stay on the line till we close this out. Tim,
Okay.
Shall we go ahead and close this out? I think we're...
Sure. So in the matter of Max Hunter Camp at 59 Northwest Landing Road in East Hampton, tax map number 300-90-3-20, I move to close the public hearing. And remind me again, how long do we hold the written record open?
We keep it open for 14 days or 2 weeks after the transcript of this public hearing is posted on the town website.
What she said.
Second.
Okay, I concur.
And I concur as well. Okay, thank you, Tim and board members. And Eleni, thank you for your work on this. And Max, thank you for participating.
Thank you for everything. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move on now to our second public hearing of the evening. The applicant is Irving Eli LLC, and this is, the lot size here is 20,983 square feet at 143 Marine Boulevard in Springs, tax map number 300-39-8-1. And the project description here is to demolish an existing two-story residence, detached garage, and appurtenances, and construct a new 3,995 square foot, one-story residence with decking and hot tub, attached garage, sanitary system, 200 square feet of mechanical shed, and driveway on a parcel of land containing barrier, primary dunes, beaches, and beach vegetation. The relief sought is a natural resources special permit pursuant to section 255-4-20, variances from section 255-4-40 coastal setbacks of the town code, and any other relief necessary. Variances of 20.3 feet, 47 feet, and 12 feet are required to allow the residence, decking, and hot tub and shed to be constructed 79.7 feet, 53 feet, and 88 feet respectively from the barrier dune crest where a 100-foot setback is required. This is in the B residence zoning district. The flood zone here is VE, velocity flood zone, elevation 17, and X flood zone, and the secret class is type 2. And council, do we have a proper affidavit of service and posting?
First, I want to know if we have the applicant or the applicant's agent participating.
We have a caller on the line. If I could bring them in, Chair, I believe that's the person you're looking for.
Sure, please do.
Hey, Chairman Whelan, it's Andy Hammer. I'm here with Billy Hayjack.
Okay,
I'm
good
the
evening.
applicant for this.
We have the applicant agent. So I have reviewed the affidavit of service and posting. The mailings were done on the 24th of June, and the physical posting was done on the 25th of June. So the paperwork appears to be in order.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, council. This is, and good evening, Andy, and good evening, Billy. Good evening to you both. This is in my Amagansett district, so I have a field report, and Brian Frank is the planner on this application, and Brian has offered to help me share the photos on the screen. Brian, are you there?
Pardon me. Yes, I am, Mr. Chairman, and if you don't mind, I'll share my screen now, and you can give your field report.
Great. Thank you, Brian, for doing that. Appreciate it. Okay, so here we have, this is a shot from the driveway. It was very, very nicely posted, I must say. You see on the left, it's chained off there. It says, private, keep out. And you can see it looks like it has not been used in a while. When you walk around the house, there's a couple of things that are kind of caving in, and the grass is growing all through the asphalt cracks and that sort of thing. So anyway, this is from Marine Boulevard. You can see it's actually fairly well screened with those pitch pine or whatever they are there on the left. Next shot, Brian, please. Now I looked here to the east, looking up Marine Boulevard. And let's see, Brian, what would that street be across the way there? Do you recall? I can't recall right now.
To the north of Marine, no. When we bring up the neighborhood aerial, I'm sure we can reference it then.
Yeah, exactly. So that's just a street that just happens.
That might be surf, actually. I'm going to guess.
I think it is.
A paving that wide might be surf.
Yeah, I believe that, because I drove down there. I believe you're correct. So anyway, that's that. Next shot, please, Brian. Okay, this is, excuse me. This is looking to the west down Marine Boulevard, just to give you a sense of the area at this time of year. It's certainly better screened in the summertime with all the vegetation and foliage. Next shot, please, Brian. Here, I've just walked in the driveway. As you can see, as I was saying, there's some cave-ins in the driveway, and that's basically the full house right there. Next shot, please, Brian. Now I've just turned to the right, is for character of the neighborhood and the adjacent neighbors to the west of the house there. Next shot, please. And the same thing, turn to the left now. Towards the east, you see some of the neighboring houses on the east side of the property. Next shot, please. Now I've walked around the back of the house. The east side of the house, this is facing west. Just to kind of give you a sense of the scale of the house that's existing. You know, there's a lot of pavement between the parking, the driveway, and where the parking comes up and wraps around the house on the east side. As Brian mentioned in this town, there's quite a bit of paving coverage there. And then you've got this pretty expansive brick terrace as well, and some minor, smaller deck areas as well. Next shot, please, Brian. Next photo. Here I have, let's see, I've walked out onto I believe I'm standing on the kind of the landing there on the walk to the beach. And I've taken a shot to the west. It's, you know, a spectacular dune, and it's very deep. It's very deep there, I must say. And that beach grass is incredibly thick, and it just looks in perfect condition. It's really some nice vegetation there. Next shot, Brian, please. Now I spun around looking to the east, to the same thing. You just see that beautiful vegetation and dune area there. And that's a garage there, an existing garage, and some fencing there on the left side of the photo. And you see I'm looking out at the end of this kind of platform that Brian mentions in his technical analysis as well. And there may be one more, Brian. Yeah, I just took a shot. I walked down towards the beach just to give you a sense of the vegetation and the scale of the project to the existing house right there. That may be it, Brian.
Yep, I think so. Oh, look at that. I blew it up.
That's all right. Board members, any questions on the field report? No? Okay, then we will go right first off to the applicants. Mr. Hammer is an attorney. Billy is not. Billy, do you mind if I swear you in for the evening, please?
Sure.
Great. Billy, do you swear to affirm the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. So good evening to you both, and please go ahead.
Sure. Good evening, Chairman Whelan. I'm here, obviously, with Billy. He's physically distanced from me, but he is in my office. Just so you know, I have Emily Lee, who's an intern. She's not going to be testifying tonight. I was really trying to give her a lesson in civics. She's going into her freshman year of college. This is a virtual lesson in civics and good local government, but probably better than a virtual semester, or maybe worse. I don't know. We'll ask her when we're done. I did want to point out that we also had Paul and Kat from Bates Massey. Paul Massey and Kat Wheel were going to join from Bates Massey. I think the hearing was slated to be at 7:10. So I don't know if they're watching this or that they might call in as well, as did the owner, Dave and Marcia Kaplan. I think we're a couple minutes away from the slated start time, so maybe I'll just continue, and if they do call in, they can join up if they need to, or if you have questions, you know, we can.
Yeah, Andy, hold on a second. Counsel, that was probably my fault there. We jumped the gun there. Is that an issue, Counsel? I think you're muted, Nancy Lynn.
This was noticed for 6:50, I believe.
Oh, okay, good.
So this was, we're in the first one was 6:30, the second was 6:50, our third one is 7:10.
Oh,
So
you
I think
scared me.
still-
Andy,
We're still in the right time.
We're at the right time. Okay, go ahead, Andy, please.
Okay. So, you know, this being my first virtual hearing, I'm going to try and present our project clearly and articulate all the positive enhancements we look forward to advancing on this project. I think that the photos that John took were very well demonstrative. I would say that's probably the nicest garage in terms of its coastal location in America. That will be removed, and it's probably one of the most significant dune encroachments you'll see as you look on the eastern perspective of the property. I think Brian's TAM did a pretty admirable job of trying to track the building history on this parcel, which is sort of extensive. The Kaplans purchased a property with the intent of redevelopment of the existing house. John, you are correct. They haven't lived in the house since they purchased it. The house is not uninhabitable, but it does require some enhancements to render it livable. And I think their position was they weren't going to make the investment in the existing structure because they thought they could do better. The plans on file with the building department have a discrepancy in the calculated gross floor area. That's about 1,500 square feet. I can't really explain that, but the plans are part of the CO. As we're proposing to remove pretty much all of the existing improvements, it's somewhat diluted in its relevancy. The proposed house is close to the same size as the existing house on the property. As a matter of fact, if you subtract the mechanical space that we're required to put above base flood elevation within the house, it's probably a little bit smaller, and we don't have a detached garage, which is one of the prominent features on that property. The existing house decks and accessory structures are highly non-conforming. If you look, you can see the garage is 21 feet off the primary dune crest. The deck and patio area is about 33 feet, and the residence is about 51 feet from the primary dune crest. None of the existing structures comply with velocity flood zone foundation requirements. The TAM mentions that this property was at one time impacted by erosion, although it does seem to be accreting or building up in recent time. However, based on science as well as the town's comprehensive plan, we think a retreat from the coastal feature appears to be wise, as well as compliance with FEMA elevation and foundation requirements would be warranted on be required for any redevelopment, but it certainly didn't make sense to invest in the existing structure if we could achieve what we think is a more meaningful reduction. And that's what we think this application does. I did want to call the board's attention to a series of revised plans that were submitted on March 2nd in response to the comments in the TAM. The revised plans included a revegetation plan by James Grime Land Design, as well as revised architectural and site plans. You'll notice that the revised site plan increased the setback from the staircase and hot tub to 70.7 feet and 72 feet respectively. They were previously proposed at 66 and 64 feet from the dune crest. Basically, we attempted to better the proposed setback, and we were able to achieve meaningful results, and I think it made a difference. It also results in a decrease in total lot coverage for the application. One other submittal I wanted to draw your attention to was a street view perspective that was submitted last week, prepared by Bates Massey Architects. I thought this was an important piece of the puzzle for the board to examine. It shows a pretty low structure, even with the flood zone compliance, that will blend into the landscape of Marine Boulevard. It's a one-story structure, and although it's not shown, I think the beach perspective will also be reduced from the landward retreat of the structure from the dune crest. The landscape plan is another thoughtful piece of the puzzle here that I think will both screen the residents from the street and neighboring properties, as well as restore the vegetated buffer and restore the duneland features on the property after the existing improvements are removed. I think if you look at the maps, and it's not called out quite as clearly as I would like it to be for discussion purposes, but the existing house, the pavement, the patios, the garage, those are significant encroachments into the dunescape that once they're removed and revegetated, it's going to make, those perspective views that John showed earlier are only going to get more and more dramatic as we move down the line. Basically, there's a lot of benefits associated with this project, including the IA sanitary system, FEMA compliance. We've nearly doubled, and in some cases exceeded a doubling of the setback to the dune crest from the existing improvements. The revegetation is going to be a really beautiful addition to the property. We've lowered total lot coverage, and I think there's also going to be a significant aesthetic improvement. We have a beautiful Bates Massey house that's being proposed on the property that I think is going to be a real welcome addition to the neighborhood. I was hoping that Paul would be online if you had any questions specifically related to the structure, but we're available to answer questions. Billy and I are here, certainly, and maybe the other proponents will also be on the line shortly.
Okay.
So, any questions, we're happy to answer them.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, there's a caller on the line that I believe is the applicant.
Okay, let's go ahead and let them, if you could bring them in, please.
Hello, caller. You're live with the ZBA. Could you state your name, please?
This is Marcia Kaplan and David Kaplan.
Okay, good evening. Welcome to your meeting, your public hearing. Are you, either of you, an attorney?
Yes.
Okay. If you are an attorney, I don't have to swear you in. If you are someone, if you are not an attorney, I have to swear you in for the evening. Okay, so
I am an attorney. I'm licensed to practice in Washington, D.C.
This is David. I do have a law degree, but I'm not licensed to practice law. So I'm happy to be sworn in.
okay.
I think we have too many attorneys. We might have exceeded the allowable. I don't know. Is there any-
Yeah. Okay. If you could, do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening to you both, and go ahead with your comments, please. Or are you just here
I
to
don't
answer
think that
questions?
Yeah, they're
Yes.
just
Well,
here to listen in and might have some points of information if the board so requests, but I don't think they were planning on making much comment other than I'm sure they're looking forward to redevelopment of this property in a beautiful manner.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
this is David again. This is David. The only thing I'd like to say is that my wife and I have rented properties now in Amagansett for any number of five years. My wife is reminding me. We love it. We love the area. We love the neighborhood, and we want to be good neighbors. We've tried with the help of Andy and Billy and Paul Massey and others to try to fit in with the requirements and the aesthetics. And we just want to say that we are very, very excited and are very hopeful that you'll have a positive response to the efforts and hoping that we can move forward. So thank you very, very much for your time and effort.
Okay. Thank you for joining us. Andy, I just have one question. If you could just clarify for the record, you mentioned the GFA, the existing house. Can you give us the real numbers now of the existing GFA and the proposed, please?
Sure, I think Billy is probably better situated. He has
Sure.
the plans with the callouts on them, and I'll let him elaborate on that right now.
So we used the plans that are on file with the town building department and calculated the existing residence to be 3,768 square feet in size.
Mm-hmm.
The proposed residence, and let me just pull together. Yeah. So the proposed residence is 3,995 square feet. And as Andy indicated,
Billy, this is. Oh, go ahead, John. I'll let you go.
No, that's good for now. Go ahead, Roy. Thank you.
All right, Billy, if you can tell me the existing coverage and the proposed.
It's 12,592.
so existing building coverage or total coverage?
Yeah.
I can give you both.
No, I'd like the building coverage.
Okay. Existing building coverage is 4,232 square feet, and the proposed building coverage is 5,235 square feet.
So the first was
I would point out,
4,000.
though,
I thought Andy said there was going to be a reduction
sorry?
in coverage.
there's a reduction in total coverage.
And what is the total coverage
existing,
difference?
Existing total coverage is 12,592 square feet, and proposed is 8,148 square feet.
Keep in mind,
I'm just trying.
Total.
So now the existing residence, give me a firmer, is 2-story?
That's
It
correct.
is correct, yes, 2-story.
I'm just trying to get an idea of the impact on the neighborhood. This is a single story and it looks like it's elevated with 4 attachments to the ground, basically. Is that what I'm seeing?
It's on piles. Yeah, the building will be on piles.
Right. So the overall proposed impact on the property will be a little bit more sprawl, though, even though you're reducing total coverage, a little bit more sprawl than the existing house.
Well, there's more
It's
roof
a much
area.
longer.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get a visual. I'm just trying to get a visual of the new house relative to the existing in the neighborhood.
And I would say that in terms of the actual on the property, the sprawl is much reduced by the fact that it's a much more compact footprint. You know, we're pulling everything back into the front of the property, which was, you know, developed in residential sense, but it didn't have hard structures on it. You know, it included parts of the driveway, et cetera, but we're pulling all of that. You know, the 4,000 square foot of total lot coverage was largely paved and patio areas right on the dune crest. So we're kind of retreating that towards the streetscape. As a matter of fact, that streetscape document that we submitted is a pretty good indication of the Marine Boulevard view of the project, and it looks pretty diminished from Marine Boulevard, despite all the, you know, moving it closer to the road. You know, we're maintaining enough space that between the paved surface of Marine Boulevard, which is not typically up to the property line, the perception there, I think, is going to be very compatible with the neighborhood. And you know, I don't consider it sprawl, because I think we're really reducing total lot coverage in the area that matters most on the property.
Hey, could you show that rendering that was recently submitted? Is that possible to show on the screen?
Terry, I don't have it in a digital folder right now. That it would probably take a few minutes for me to dig it out of the server. I apologize.
I mean, I have a copy, but I don't know if member Deline has it.
No, I don't. One of the things with the Zoom meetings is we don't have the benefit of the file
Brian,
in front
I'll
of us.
email it to you, Brian, and maybe you can pull it up.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
While we're waiting.
Yeah, well,
I think so. Andy Hammer, you mentioned 2 variances that changed. Could you repeat those? Not sure I got them.
Sure. On the
For the
revised
spa and garage is going away.
Yeah, so there was a staircase and a hot tub. In the original plans that were submitted, we reduced it. It was originally proposed 66 and 64 feet from the dune crest, meaning that the staircase was going to be 66 and the hot tub was 64. We were able to pull those back to 70 feet and 72 feet, respectively. So we were able to basically increase that setback and increase the vegetated buffer between the improvements. So the closest point of improvement right now is going to be 70.7 feet. So we were able to achieve a significant reduction of that. But, you know, if you look at the actual areas of the encroachments, those are because of the staircase. You know, you're coming from a fairly significant height difference. So it's a scissored staircase that has to come down the stairs. You know, that was how it was designed to, you know, it can't be made much shorter, basically. And that's the only encroachment in that area. There's no pool. There's nothing landward of it. And the house is significantly farther behind the staircase, because it's the main access from the first floor of the house down to the beach level, basically.
Andy, as well.
Out a little bit off.
Andy, as well, do I understand that platform I mentioned, you're going to make that to align with the 6-foot stairs? Is that correct? That, you know, the landing up on the walkway to the beach? Can you hear me?
I don't think we had proposed this staircase because it's existing. It was part of the approved, the prior certificate of occupancy, and it exists right now. And I don't think we were planning on changing any of that, just because we were trying to reduce any encroachment into that area, which is relatively undisturbed right now.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Chairman, if I may, this is Mike at LTV. I believe the applicant's architect is on the line.
Okay, sure.
Hello, caller. You're now on the line with the ZBA. Could you state your name?
Paul Massey.
Hi, Paul. Good evening. It's John Whelan. So, Paul, I will swear you in for the evening, okay?
Sure.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Okay.
I swear.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
Did you want to, have you been listening to our conversation here or discussion?
I have, and if I need to comment and you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. But I think that Andy and Billy have been answering everything, so I'll just listen along, and if you need me, I'm happy to contribute.
Okay. Okay. Thank
I
you.
I have a question about the difference in the total coverage of the driveways. I wondered if the applicants could address that.
In terms of the existing driveway is largely pavement, and we're switching to a pervious driveway, which is obviously more compatible with the Duneland features. There is a lot of pavement on this property, even over by the garage area. That's just going to be removed and revegetated, and you can see that on the re-veg plan. It's a pretty dramatic area.
I appreciate that part of it. I just wondered in terms of the total coverage comparison between what is there and what is being proposed.
So we didn't, Billy Hayjack here. We don't have a count. We didn't break out the asphalt separately, the area of asphalt, but I can just reinforce the reduction in coverage is existing is 12,590 square feet, and what's proposed is 8,140 square feet. What's more notable about those figures, though, is that the amount of coverage that's within the 100-foot wetland setback is 9,000 square feet. I'm sorry, within the dune crest setback is over 9,000, and what's being proposed is about 3,000. So it's a third of the amount of coverage within the required setback.
Yeah, so my observation is you still have a fairly substantial driveway in the dunes, and I just wondered how that compared to the previous driveway. So it doesn't sound like you have that information.
We have parking for, what we're proposing is a driveway. It's a single lane driveway with parking for 2 automobiles in front of the house, and then an area where you could pull into the garage that's below the residence. So I don't know if you're looking at that substantial, or if it's parking for about 4
board members, could I hop in for a second?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, Brian. Please do.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to know if it would help the board's discussion if I brought up one of the aerial photos, kind of the main aerial photo, bird's eye view of the property, to kind of give you a better depiction of what's on the property now than the black and white survey does.
Okay, Brian, before you do that, can I just ask a question on this street view, if you will? So before we go out of it? No, to the applicant.
Oh, of course.
Yeah. I'm looking at the February 2019 drawings, which show the elevations. And it shows the grade. It appears on the street view, the grade is pulled up quite a bit higher on this house than on those February 2019. Can you explain what's going on here? Looks like the grade on the street view, right, that we're looking at is pulled up quite a bit. So I think it'd be important to see or to know what's happening with the grade existing proposed.
Is that the latest set? The latest set? You say they send an update, and I can't make out the date. June 27th? I can't see.
I'm looking at a February 19, 2019. shows elevations of the house, and then on the street view, it shows the grade appears to be much higher. I just wanted to know what the intent is.
Well, there's a berm. There's presently a berm in front of the house, and the intent is to maintain most of that berm. If you look at the site plan by Rayner, it shows the existing and proposed topography, and the idea is to maintain that berm feature in front of the house.
Okay. That's...
Mr. Chairman, if I may interrupt, this is Paul Massey from Bates Massey Architects.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
We were able to calculate one of the questions in the asphalt area. The existing is 5,837 square feet, and then the proposed pervious gravel driveway is 2,060 square feet.
Okay, thanks. That's very helpful. Thank you, Paul. Brian, maybe before you pull that up, Brian, I'll swear you in for the evening, if you please, Brian Frank.
Sure.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great. Thanks, Brian. If you want to go ahead and pull that aerial up, that could be helpful. Those numbers certainly were helpful from Paul as well. Maybe with your cursor, Brian, you could kind of walk through, you could point out the existing driveway. Oh, I'm sorry, on the survey I was going to say, but don't worry, go to the aerial.
I can. It is faint, but I think if I show you the aerial first and then go back to the survey, it may jump out a little bit.
Yeah.
So I do have an aerial of the subject property with the neighboring properties adjacent to it, but this is more of the close-up view of the Irving Eli property with the existing improvements. So just a little bit of background is, as the assessment notes, the house was originally built in 1960. There were numerous, at least 5 zoning board applications over the years. It's surprising to see that this is a house that was moved back 50 feet in the mid 80s. And I note that, the long-term chairman of the board for decades, Phil Gamble, used to talk about an erosion problem in Beach Hampton that predates my tenure working with the town, and it was kind of hard to envision because fortunately this area does in a lot of places have a well-developed primary dune, but the erosion was bad enough in the mid 80s that the house was relocated 50 feet landward, and despite that it's still pretty non-conforming to dune crest setback. The dune crest kind of runs roughly in this area here. So you can see the expansive brick patio, the circular driveway with a very large parking area, the deck kind of built into the primary dune, and the detached garage. This is one of the larger lots on Marine Boulevard. And you know that although there isn't an active erosion problem on Marine Boulevard, it is mapped as a high hazard area, as the board knows, and I'm sure everybody in party in designing this application knows. The coastal erosion hazard area boundary, which goes back to 1988, is located up by Marine Boulevard. Most of these areas most of the property are located in a velocity flood zone, which requires higher first floor elevations above sea level and requires piling foundation to allow the inundation in wave action in the event that occurs. Marine Boulevard has development of varying ages. The dune has kind of rolled landward over the years, so the older development, the houses that were built farther south on the lot, are very close to the dune. And they all, as they either get run down or they change ownership, they basically have choices between making minor improvements that don't trigger compliance with FEMA, small additions, preferably on the landward side of the houses, that would still need variances, or redevelopments in what we would encourage in the planning department to be in the most conforming location possible. And in reviewing the application, the residence is proposed 27 feet from the front yard lot line of Marine Boulevard. And it's really just within a foot or two. I'm sure I could bring up the elevation plans if you need to see it, of the pyramid height requirement from Marine Boulevard. The depth of the house, and if it's helpful now that you've seen the survey, just to give you a little bit of perspective, this is the neighborhood. So that was Surf Drive across the street. These are some of the neighboring properties on Marine Boulevard, including one of the only vacant lots, maybe the only vacant lot left that the board visited an application on last year under the name of Cohen. But you see the age of the location of the houses relative to the Dunecrest setback, relative to the Dunecrest. And it is desirable to see these properties redeveloped in the most conforming location possible when they do get redeveloped. I can go back to the survey now if that's helpful.
Sure. That was very helpful, though. Thank you, Brian.
So now these
point out the existing house right there, just to bring it for the public.
It is faint. It's in a dashed grayscale, and I think, being a digital image up on the board without color doesn't really make it jump out. But you can see this line here is the footprint of that brick patio.
Yeah. And
this is the house.
Yeah.
It is a little busy with the improvements. I don't know if I could even really point out where the driveway is, but this is the proposed driveway now. And you can see in that grayscale dashed line where the, pardon me, where the detached garage is.
Right.
So in reviewing the application, the depth of the house is about 33 feet. The deck here is the deck on the south side that runs the east-west length of the house is fairly nominal in width, and that contributes to the planning department's lack of objection to the variances for those structures. The planning department did recommend reducing the deck, and the applicants have agreed to do that, to reduce the width of the deck to the 6-foot width that these pre-existing steps that go to the north have, and maintain this. It's a very modest staircase and a very functional sand footpath that provides access to the Atlantic Ocean beach. Pardon, again. There is a purported scenic easement from prior zoning board determinations, and it's not clear to me whether that has been filed or not. The planning department has recommended a standard language scenic and conservation easement 50 feet landward of the primary Dunecrest to facilitate the long-term conservation of the natural feature, which is both habitat, aesthetic, and non-structural erosion protection. And I think that's about it in a nutshell. The landscaping plan does have one non-native plant in it, and the planning department doesn't object to the use of non-invasive ornamentals between the improvement and the street to help soften the appearance of the building. Hollywood juniper, or Torolosa juniper, it's sometimes called, is a hardy non-native. It looks a little bit like our native cedar, and it's one of the few species that is tolerant of this condition. It doesn't really spread, and the planning department does not have an objection to its use between the house and the pavement of Marine Boulevard. Beyond that, I'm happy to answer any questions that I can.
Okay, thank you very much,
Mr. Chairman.
Sure.
This is Paul Massey. I just wanted to answer Roy's question. Roy, if you're looking at the elevation on A201, that is an elevation taken right at the face of the building. And as Billy pointed out, there is a berm, an existing berm between the house and the road, and our street view elevation is taken through the berm area, basically where the road is, and that's why you're seeing a difference.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that.
No problem.
Thank you, Paul. Board members, any questions for Brian or Paul or Andy? No?
Nope.
Okay. Okay, Andy or Billy, any closing comments you'd like to make?
I did want to comment that, I think Member Brenneman was confused. It's, the survey is not all that illustrative. I think if you have the landscape plan, it shows, the driveway looks a little, because it's all in grayscale, but if you look at the landscape plan, it shows parking and circulation and areas that are going to be, if you looked at the aerial, you get a sense of the big circular driveway. That's not what we're proposing here at all, and I think it stands out more on the landscape plan. That is color, it's in color and it shows the planting scheme, but I think that would make it a lot clearer that the driveway that we're proposing is much reduced versus the existing parking areas. If there's any question about that, I think that's going to be the best document to look at.
Great, and is that Brian thank you, Brian. Is that Brian bringing that up? Great. There we have the proposed landscape plan. Andy, have you or Billy, or I don't know if the Kaplans are still on, have you discussed the 50-foot scenic easement with the applicants?
Yes, and we don't object to it. Obviously it has to provide for the existing pathways, but we think that's a wise conservation move.
And again, that would be 50 feet landward of the bluff crest line, correct?
That is correct.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
As a matter of fact, before we remove the house, that would encumber the house, the garage, portions of the house, the garage. So, I think that's going to be a valuable effort to diminish the, future development of these areas.
Right. Okay. Well, that's good to know. Thank you. Board members, any questions for the applicants or their agent?
No further questions from me.
No?
No, I guess you just agree to all the recommended project conditions, which included a number of things we spoke about.
Yeah, that's a good point. Did you hear that, Andy and Billy? Are you all agreeing to the recommended conditions?
Yeah, I think we're fine with it.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I would point out that the scenic easement, this is another strange one where the easement, we can only file the scenic easement after the structures are removed. So rather than having it being a condition of a building permit for the new residents, we would like it to be a condition of the scenic easement. That's condition E, because we're going to be demolishing a structure within the scenic easement area. So It should probably be converted to be a condition of certificate of occupancy, because the easement in New York is not effective under New York law until you file it. So what we would do is have it accepted, granted as a condition of the building permit, and then file it and show proof of recordation, issuance of a CO if the board thinks to approve the project.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question regarding the project limiting fence and the sequencing.
Sure. Go ahead.
So, Andy and maybe Paul, you're going to be demolishing an existing house, therefore you're going to need a project limiting fence in place before that building permit is issued, which is going to encompass the scope of the work of the demolition. Is that correct?
Yes.
Right. So what we typically look for then is, I think that project limiting fence then needs to be, after the demolition of the house, is to be tightened up to fit with the new construction, so there's no further construction activities on the dune side of that house where that original limiting fence is. So I think the limiting fence has to be moved and tightened up to the construction, and possibly even revegetated early on as you can. But I don't think there should be construction activity on or near that dune where we are demolishing that house.
Well, I think obviously we want to avoid the dune. We would like to maintain some form of access to that area of the property just for the construction purposes. But yes, I certainly agree that once we remove the garage is probably the biggest example. It's so close to the primary dune crest that we should wrap to demolish it. We would wrap the project limiting fence on the seaward side of it, and after it's removed and regraded, to reestablish the contours, those areas would be pulled back, essentially, I think is what Roy is suggesting.
That's correct.
Right. Yeah, thank you, Roy. Thank you for that, Andy. Thank you.
Board members, if I could just offer an opinion, if that project limiting fencing is the snow fencing, you could probably, as opposed to the plastic fencing, you could probably leave it up there and put a second row of fencing in there and, allowing for a gap for access, leave that wooden sand fence or snow fence up there to continue to help accrete the dune. It's
That's
something
a good
to consider.
point. That might be a good point.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay.
Thanks, Brian.
I agree with that.
Sir, we also have a caller on the line.
Okay. Let's go ahead and take that call, Mike, if you could put them on.
Yes, sir. Just one moment. Unmuting now. Hello, caller. You're live with the ZBA. Could you state your name, please? Hello, caller. Are you there? The line's open, but hearing nothing if you want to continue.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, let's see. I think we're about squared away. Board members, any final questions or? Okay. As you know, the public hearing for the applicants will stay open. The written record will stay open for 2 weeks after the transcript is posted on the town website. So that for the public and people who didn't get a chance to call in or speak, they have a few weeks to do so. So with that in mind, I would like to make a motion with regard to, pardon me, I just have to go back on my agenda here. With regard to Urban Eli LLC, located at 143 Marine Boulevard, tax map number 300-39-8-1, to close the public hearing and leave the written record open for 2 weeks after the transcript is posted on the town website.
Second.
Concur.
Concur.
Okay, thank you, board members. And thank you to the applicants and their agents, and have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Everybody stay safe.
Thank you.
Take care, stay safe.
Okay.
Thank you, and thank you, Brian, for your work on this. To Brian Frank as well. Okay, we will move on now to our third and final public hearing for the evening. The applicant is 153 Mulford Associates LLC. The lot size and location is 4,182 square feet at 153 Mulford Lane, Amagansett, tax map number 300-84-2-5. The project description is to construct approximately 110 linear feet of stone armor revetment and upgraded sanitary system on a parcel of land containing tidal wetlands, dunes, beach vegetation, and located within the town's jurisdiction of freshwater wetlands. The relief sought is a natural resources special permit pursuant to section 255-4-20 and a variance from section 255-3-85 coastal erosion overlay district regulations. A variance is required to construct a stone armor revetment where the installation of a new coastal erosion structure is prohibited. This is in an A residence zoning district. The flood zone here is AE flood zone elevation 10 and VE flood zone elevation 12 feet. And the secret class is unlisted. And council, do we have a proper affidavit of service and posting?
Well, we have, our paperwork shows that the mailings were done on the 26th of June, and the posting was done on the 27th day of June, so the paperwork appears to be in order.
Okay, thank you. And once again, this is in my Amagansett district here. Let's see, I don't know. And once again, Brian, thank you. Brian helped me out here with getting these on the screen. Brian, the first one I took is actually from the parking lot. Kind of, can you go back to that one? I sort of did sequence. Let's see if I can pick it. Oh yeah, let's see. I think. Yes, I think it's 0. No, let's see. 1 second. Maybe it's. No, I beg your pardon. It's probably 0. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, 007, Brian. Thank you. So this is the current residence, the application, the current structure there at 153 Mulford Lane. This is the landing road at the end of Mulford Lane. It was properly noticed, posted on the left. Kind of, you see it. It's kind of hard to see. It's by the white. That was a white covered up small car, and the posting is just kind of in that same white patch in the middle of the photo, to the right of the telephone pole. And you see on the sand going into the left, that is the access for the adjacent for 157 Mulford. And those are just some beach chairs kind of at the end of the road, and you start to see some of the rocks there from the association's revetment or stones that were placed there. And that's the house in the distance. You see the other structure that's offshore. Next shot, Brian, please. Next photo. Now I walk down the beach and I'm looking back at the house. You see the house there. And again, the structure and all of those stones there are from the association's, the homeowners association's application at the end of the road there. Next slide, please. Next photo. I've just come a little closer. Again, those are the same association stones that were placed there. That's the residence. I'll just point out here because I go into the foundation area a bit. You see there's a trellis on the right over the exterior deck, and where a lot of the activity is proposed below that deck. The two-story portion of the house is the same portion that currently has some concrete cinder block like crawl space under it. The rest of the structure is up on either like 8 to 10 inch. It looks like more like 8-inch piling and some 4x4s and some stone cinder block piers. It's kind of a whole mixture of things you'll see later on. Next photo, please. This is, again, I'm just walking along. I'm getting closer to kind of the subject area of this application there. And now we're sort of merging into where stones were placed, where the homeowners' stones sort of merge into stones that were placed in front of and under this structure, the applicant's residence. Next photo, please. So here, as I said, you see a mixture of kind of the piling, some 4x4s on, so you see those exposed concrete piers that they're sitting on. That is the deck, and again, looking offshore at the structure out there. Next photo, please. Here I've crawled under, and now I'm looking I'm looking from the sea, from the bay, looking landward. And you see on the right side some of those cinder block piers, the floor joist above you, and then you see the plumbing lines and the waste line going out there at the back, at the rear of the photo. And in the far distances, you see is where the crawl space is at the very back of this photo. You'll see that sanitary waste line goes literally right outside the building, and there's the exposed like cesspool there that's literally leaching into the bay, and you can smell it. I mean, it's like water right there. It's not very good. Next photo, please.
Whoops. Oh, boy.
That's all right. That's good to zoom in on them. That's better.
Sorry, it kind of.
Yeah, that's right. I can just go to next. You can just go through. Yeah, next after that. Let's see.
Yeah, I'm not getting that arrow to pop up.
Yeah. You might have to.
Maybe that's your last.
No, it's
photo
not.
in that direction, and that the
Yeah, go
others
back.
are.
Yeah, that's fine. We can go the other way. It doesn't matter which way. You can go either way, right? So we'll go back. So this one here now, I've walked into the. Thank you, Brian. This one I've walked into the easement. So this is a neighboring house on the left of the photo. You see the residence offshore, and there's a little path here, but directly kind of below the residence in this picture, that exposed cesspool there. Photos. I just wanted to give you a sense of some of the vegetation and the elevation here of the back of the site and the back of this would be the kind of the southwest side of the residence on the right hand side of the applicant's residence. Next one back, if you could, Brian. And let's see here. Yeah, I've just gotten, this is just a little closer portion you see from the easement road to the two-story portion. Next, please. This is that cesspool I was mentioning that the water's literally leaching right there. It's pretty horrible. And on the left side of this photo is the neighbors, 157, this kind of, I don't know what you'd call it. I guess it's some sort of it's a wall. They're 4x4s or 6x6s that wrap around and retain some earth there. Next, please. That might be, yeah, there you see it on the right side of the photo there. And again, you see the whole mishmash of what's holding this house up right now. I guess it's been holding it up for a long time. And again, the cesspool is in the center of this picture between the house and that 6x6 kind of enclosure. And that may be the last one, Brian. Oh yeah, then I just walked out to give you a sense of this is where the tide was, and you can see it at this portion right here. It's not really passable by the public. I mean, you can climb over the rocks, but Brian, you'd probably know at a lower tide, maybe you can comment on the access around the house at a lower tide. I think it was fairly high when I was there this afternoon. That may be it, Brian. I'm not sure. That's that's a neighboring house looking over it. That last shot right there is the neighboring 157 Mulford, just to give you a sense of that and the shoreline there. That may be it.
Yep, I think it is.
Okay, thanks for doing that, Brian. Board members, any questions on this field report?
Well, not on that.
Yep.
But, we got a pretty large submission that we just received on July 6th in response to the TAM.
Yeah, and
it's a pretty large document. I don't know if the applicant can just talk about what's different.
I did not receive it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in our mailboxes today. It was only received by Brittany yesterday.
Yeah. So
actually, that was received by the board and has been posted on the website for a little while now. The written copy came in later, but that was I think posted.
Oh, so nothing's different in this.
Do you have the applicant on the line?
Okay, sure. Let's bring it.
Aram Turchunian, First Coastal, West Hampton, on behalf of the applicant.
Okay, good evening. Good evening, Aram. We will, I'll start off by swearing you in, if you please, Aram. Raise your right hand. Or do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I solemnly do.
Excellent. And I'll remind the board members, this just, I guess I'm not sure why it just kind of got to us, but this written record will be left open again for a couple of weeks. We need to get up, and we have 2 weeks after that. So the board we will have time to review this, albeit after the public hearing. But at the end of the evening tonight, for some reason, board members, if you feel that you would need further comment from the applicants without being repetitive or their agent, we could always hold the public hearing open. If you would like that, but that's going to be up to the board members, that decision. So Aram, good evening. If you want to go ahead, please.
Mr. Chairman,
Aram,
if I
before
may,
you
this
start,
is Mike at LTV. We also have the attorneys on the line, I believe, if you want me to unmute them too.
Okay, please do. And Brian, while we're unmuting them, go ahead, Brian. You were going to say, Brian?
I just wanted to offer to the board as well as to the applicant that as the applications get a little bit more involved than some of our earlier Zoom hearings, if there's anything that I can bring up on the screen at the request of the applicant or at the request of the board that facilitates the discussion of the application, ask, and if I have it readily available, or even if I don't, I'll try to get it. If it improves these virtual hearings, just ask. And that it includes, that offer extends to Aram as well as Alice and Brian, who I think are dialing in.
Okay, thanks very much, Brian. We appreciate that. Okay, do we have the attorneys on now, Mike?
Caller, you're live on the air with the ZBA.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. This is Alice Cooley of Matthews, Kirsten Cooley, and I also have my partner, Brian Matthews, here.
Good evening, everyone.
Okay, good evening to you both.
Do you mind if I start?
Sure, go ahead. Please do.
Thank you very much. As you know, this application is to construct a stone armor revetment consistent with the stone armor revetment approved for the adjoining property to the west, and it's designed to connect to that property. I note that the owner of the adjoining property did submit a letter of support of this application to the file. A review of that file, the Young and Lemieux property, shows that the planning department did express a preference during the course of the review of that revetment that this property be included because of the anticipated impact that such a revetment would have on this property. In fact, that revetment was originally denied by the zoning board in part because it failed to incorporate this property, and was later approved after the applicant demonstrated they were unable to include the previous owner of this property in their application. In addition, the applicant has applied to upgrade the sanitary system to a nitrogen-reducing sanitary system on the most conforming location in the lot, which is undeniably a net benefit, and I think the chairman's photos really demonstrate that. We agree with the planning department's summary of mitigation, and we accept all of its conditions. There's already a substantial record for this application that I'm sure you're familiar with, at least to a certain extent, not only relating to the history of this property itself and the revetments that have been approved for the properties it adjoins to the east and west, but also the well-documented history about the chronic erosion and shoreline recession that exists in the immediate area, which the planning department concluded is one of the most severely flood and erosion-prone areas along the north shore of the East Hampton town. It's for these reasons, and the fact that the residence itself is in immediate peril, as the photographs of the site, aerial photographs, and our structural report make clear, that we respectfully request that this board grant our natural resources special permit and variance. If you have any technical questions about the project, I would definitely refer those to Mr. Tuccini.
Okay, thank you, Alice. I'll let you all, I'm sure we have plenty of questions, the board does, but we want to give you time to speak before we start asking all of our questions. Aram, did you want to go next?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to point out that, your photographs and your description of the situation, I believe were very informative and display and underscore the seriousness of the situation here. And we've approached this project with that same serious point of view. In the submissions that have been prepared for the board, we went through a pretty extensive coastal forces discussion and description. We did an extensive alternative analysis, and we believe that the project that comes before you this evening, from a coastal protection point of view, offers the most reasonable and practicable way to address the flooding and erosion issues on this site. And that, coupled with the replacement of the sanitary system, I think results in a terrific all-around project, at least the best we could hope for in this situation. And I'd be happy to answer any questions from you, the board, or Mr. Frank.
Okay, thank you, Aram. Let's see, I'll start off. Roy, do you have any questions you want to start off with? Being a vice chair here?
Chairman, I'd love to ask a question.
Go ahead.
Just, is it unusual to have a a revetment where part of the building extends to the seaward side of it?
Yes, it is. It is unusual to have that. We've done it in a few situations. The issue here is that in order to extend the revetment seaward, we would have to fill underwater lands, and the state takes a dim view of that. So we had to accommodate the design to fit the situation.
But what about the integrity of the deck that's seaward of the revetment?
Well, that deck is certainly going to have to be reinforced, but it's likely that it would experience some damage in a storm event, but it would be far less than what would occur if we were unable to build the revetment.
Thank you, Brian. I just want to say, Brian, whenever you feel compelled to do what you just did, that's excellent. I appreciate you.
Mr. Chairman, I do have some questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Roy.
And maybe this is for council. What I'd like to do is go through and establish the immediacy of this project, and basically by starting off and taking a look at the property history of this property. And in 2005, there was an application for an emergency permit, number 48891, issued 6/17/05, for it was an emergency permit, and then a year later, there was a renewal that was closed because it was never done. And again, that application was submitted as part of an emergency application. And it goes in, and then I believe the present applicant, also bought the house in 2017. There was a stop work order for septic, sand, and railings. You want to address that, Alice?
I am not certain that the stop work order that was issued in 2017 was during our client's ownership. I don't believe that it was.
I believe there was in April. I think the owner took from what I saw, it looked like the owner took possession in April of 2017. Is that correct?
I couldn't say. I don't have his deed in front of me.
I think that's
All right,
when the foreclosure sale. I think that's when the Brian Matthews. Sorry, when the foreclosure sale occurred. I'm not sure when the actual closing of title was. Following that auction, but I don't believe that stop work order related to work that our client undertook on the property.
So there was a foreclosure action that was, I believe, was done in April then. So do you know who did the work in June of 17? Just curious. Curious. All right. Then in 2018, there's an emergency application that was submitted. And once again, a building permit number 6335 for emergency work. In 2018, 6/27/2018, and in 6/12/2019, there was an attempt to reapply for that building permit to renew it, and that was expired, so it did not get renewed. My question is, over a period of time, there's been a number of emergency applications that have been done on this property that have not been carried out. Do you want to address that as far as what makes an emergency, what doesn't make an emergency?
Well, I think the structural report that we submitted to the file speaks to the level of emergency on this property. I can speak to the building permit that was issued in June of 2018. Go ahead.
Okay, so then Aram, I believe, was filed for the application in 2018. Aram, maybe you want to answer that? because if you were filed for an emergency permit in 2018, the work doesn't seem to be carried out. So the permit was tried to renew a year later. Can you tell us why in an emergency permit that work was not carried out?
That work was not authorized by the owner, as far as I know.
Okay, so who authorized the,
Roy,
again,
I can
a
answer
lot
that.
of emergency.
Roy, the issue was financial. So it was an emergency. The property owner did want to do that work. He was financially unable to do it at the time that the permit was issued. Then he was able to do it again financially, and the DEC permit had expired. We are in the process of renewing it now, and we are still seeking to renew that emergency permit.
Right, can anybody answer? I'm seeing a lot of emergency applications that have not been carried out on this property. It's going back to 2005 to now in November 19, an engineer report for a possible collapse. I'm trying to figure out what the difference is there. And then if you want to go to the 2012 Zoning Board of Appeals decision on paragraph 18, if you don't mind, I'm going to go through it. Public hearing. The board heard from the applicant's engineer, Drew Bennett, who articulated that a coastal restoration project is insufficient to save the subject lot and house. Mr. Bennett commented that the house is imminent danger of destruction by storm action, a sentiment echoed by the town's engineer, Thomas Talman. Okay, all good. Mr. Bennett went on to argue that since the littoral system has been deprived of sand through government action, the beaches are not being replenished, and as a result, the rate of erosion has drastically increased. But number 19 is kind of compelling to me because it says the majority of the board finds that the coastal erosion structure is immediately necessary. Do you know if that coastal erosion structure has been constructed to this date on the Lemieux property? Okay, so this is where I'm getting at. So again, we're coming before the town with immediate emergency actions. When maybe that's not the thing. The other thing I'm trying to figure out is the stone revetment. In your article, Memorandum of Law, it says it's in harmony with the town's code. Can you explain that? Because the code doesn't allow for hardened structure and emergency actions. So I'm just trying to figure out what the harmony is.
Alice, do you want to take that?
If I can,
Brian?
Sure. Brian Matthews. I mean, I think if you look at and I know that Aaron put in an analysis of the town code as well, and some of that statement about it being in harmony with the town code is certainly taken from the board's findings with respect to the Young and Lemieux revetment that it was approved in 2012 and was approved with this same variance to allow for a hardened structure in this area. And so it's in harmony with the town code in the sense that it meets in our view, in our experts' view, the NRSP standards for a coastal erosion structure. It meets the variance standards to allow that structure to be built on this particular property. And then it meets the particular standards for these coastal erosion structures about, the type of material they need to be built with, the type of, plans for maintenance and construction.
But on an emergency application, it recalls a sandbag revetment, not a hardened structure. Is that correct?
Pardon me? If you could say that again.
I said the emergency section of the code only refers to a temporary sandbag revetment, not a hardened structure.
Right. I guess maybe I'm not understanding the question. What I thought the question was, how does this proposed stone revetment, how is this in harmony with the town code? And that's what I was attempting to answer. Is the question, how would a sandbag replenishment be in harmony with the town code? I'm not sure I understand what.
Well, there
I'm
are
not
there are
sure I
sections in the
understand.
town code for an emergency action. There are 3 categories for satisfying an emergency action, and those are
Correct.
dealing with the structure of the houses. So, and then the third option being a sand revetment, not a hardened structure. So hardened structures are actually prohibited in Zone 2.
Understood, which is why we're seeking that variance, sir.
So the question also, moving on a little bit here, is we have a house that is does not meet FEMA and is also subject to wave action. Is that correct? So my question
That is
is,
correct.
what is this structure? How is this structure solving the FEMA, solving an issue when the house is subject to wave action? I don't understand that problem. Maybe we can get some answers, some feedback on that.
Aaron, do you want to address the wave action question?
Yeah, Aaron Tertunian, First Coastal, West Hampton Beach. Our application does not address the building itself. That is a separate issue. This is a structure designed to retain the integrity.
But Brian, could you just go back to the previous survey that you had, the site plan there, please? And I don't expect it well, I'll just throw this out here. What there was, well, that's fine. Yeah. It was one before that, the survey, I believe, if you could. Yeah, great. Yeah. So I'm wondering, so you're saying you're just dealing with this revetment, which I understand, but Alice and Brian, you're representing the applicants. I'm just curious. Well, a couple of questions I'll ask you, and let you respond. If the intent, their future intentions with the building structure. I mean, Roy brings up a very good point. It's you're protecting this thing that's up on 4x4s and is certainly not meeting, and on falling cinder block piers and things like that. And it's certainly not meeting FEMA. I believe in VE12, I believe you're going to have to be up at about 14 feet for your, plus a foot of freeboard, somewhere like 15 feet, I believe, something like that, right? For your final finished floor. You're right now, I believe that last diagram showed the finished floor, the deck elevation, about elevation 8 feet or something. Is that correct, Aaron? And so I'm just kind of wondering why this application is being bifurcated. I imagine you have some intention of doing something with the building, and it's kind of hard to approve a revetment for a structure that doesn't comply to FEMA whatsoever. And obviously, were this building to be redesigned and the same square footage put into a 2-story and pushed back further on the property, there's a lot of decking on the, we'll call that the southeast side. You see where it says porch? There's a lot of decking there that really, I don't think is, I mean, obviously it could be done without, but my point is, it seems like this could be a perfect candidate for a redevelopment and a consideration of making it both FEMA compliant, a smaller footprint, further from the coast, and then this revetment is protecting a structure that meets FEMA. And right now, you haven't commented on what the intent of the structure is to be, because it's. So if I don't know, Brian, if you and Alice wanted to take that question,
and John, to go along with that though, I'm trying to struggle with whose responsibility is this property? Is it the purchaser or the town's responsibility to approve this revetment when it's prohibited in this area? In the Star article, it refers to the fact that Mr. Fink read the terms of sale to the 4 people in attendance and basically said, it's on their responsibility. Now, I know in foreclosures that terms of sale or the referee's deed is going to put full responsibility on the purchaser to know for the existing conditions of the house. So this is where I'm going. I'm kind of curious as to, why the zoning board of the town should approve this garden structure when it's prohibited.
If I can, so there were. So far, and I appreciate it, and I appreciate the questions, and I understand the questions and the interest. But so right now, there's been a number of questions that were posited by Mr. Chairman and by Member Deline, and so I would like to get an opportunity. And they were kind of rapid fire, which is okay. It's particularly in this format that we're all obligated to do these under. But so, and I would like to go through and answer each one of them. But so it seems to be, but the first one I want to address, because it seems to be, it has been raised throughout in the analysis memo, and it was raised by Roy, by you, as kind of your first question here, at least from my recollection, about this foreclosure. The concept of the foreclosure has no relevance to this matter at all. The manner in which the applicant purchased or obtained the property is no different that they got it through a foreclosure auction because the party before them defaulted on their mortgage, if they bought it at a standard arm's length transaction, or if they inherited the property from a family member. It's really the manner in which they took title has no bearing on whether or not this application meets the standards set forth in the town code for an NRSP and for the requested variance.
Brian, that was not the question. Yeah. That was not the intent of my question. The intent of my question, the fact that it was a foreclosure, raised the bar in terms of the owner's responsibility to know what he's getting into, because it is by default that a terms of sale under foreclosure will relieve the bank from any responsibility. So all responsibility then is put in writing to the purchaser. So the purchaser has a full responsibility of knowing the exit. Agree, that's buyer beware. That's correct. So, but I think it's even, the bar is higher here.
You know what you're buying, sure. In any purchase, you know what you're buying. But so it seems to be getting towards this self-created concept. If I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, that the applicant had
that's part of it. Yeah,
to know what they were getting into, and so on that issue, the law is very clear, as I know counsel will advise, that the issue of self-created is an issue for the board to review when granting of variances, but as a matter of law, it's non-determinative. So the fact that a board may find a requested variance, the need for a requested variance to be self-created, that in and of itself does not mandate the denial of an application. But I would like to address the issue, and I'm glad you brought it up actually, because I would like to address the issue of the self-created and turning back towards the Young and Lemieux decision that was issued by the board in November of 2012. And in that instance, the board found in paragraph 16 of that same determination that Member Deline was reading from, that the majority of the board finds that the need for the variance is not self-created. Although it is true that the applicants purchased the property in 2010, they are 2 years before they got their approval. Here we're 3 years. When coastal erosion when they purchased in 2010, when coastal erosion was already an issue, the majority finds that the rate of erosion has accelerated at an alarming rate through no fault of the applicant. And that's precisely the situation that we have here. I don't think there can be any dispute, and I think it's in fact recognized in the analysis memo that, and by the town and by even the town board, as I believe Aram referenced in one of his submissions, that the chronic rate of erosion and shoreline loss on this property has continued to accelerate at an extremely fast rate. From 2001 to 2018, I think was the last number, it's lost approximately 56 feet for an average coastal erosion rate of 3.3 feet a year, and that the chronic erosion and shoreline rescission extends both east and west of this property, resulting in one of the most severely flood and erosion-prone areas along the north shore of the town. And that, I think, gets back to some of what you were talking about before, Roy, that you had some, and it was references of, emergency permits issued in 2005 and or 2006, and, a couple along the way. Why those emergency permits weren't done or weren't acted on in 13, 14 years ago, I don't think we can really say, and I don't know that it necessarily matters. But it shows that, those permits were issued. This issue has not dissipated. If anything, the emergency nature of this has gotten progressively worse over time, as the aerial images show, as the survey shows, as the property, you keep losing property to the rate of erosion at, again, 3.3 feet a year, and as the structural integrity report shows that, this property has, this house, this residence is in danger of collapse and is in imminent peril, and that is precisely the language used in the town code. And it was precisely that type of imminent peril and chronic rate of erosion that has not dissipated from 2012 till now, that the board used as the basis for not only granting the NRSP to the Lemieux property, but in granting a variance from this same variance that we're seeking here, a variance to allow a hardened structure in this coastal erosion zone 2. So
Okay, Brian,
the simple fact that the applicant purchased the property with knowing that there was erosion here doesn't really, it doesn't preclude the board in any way, color the board's the applicant's ability to submit this application, or for this board to determine whether or not the applicant meets the governing standards for the requested relief.
I understand that, but going back to the chairman's question regarding the intent to do with what's going to happen with the house.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, that was the next one I wanted to get into.
Yeah, hold on. I'm going to jump in. It's John. I want to jump in here, just if you don't mind, Roy, to add to my question before you answer it, Brian, okay? I just want to add on that, and again, and after this discussion, again, we have all of your, your information. So we have all of your documents that we've looked at and will be reviewed more, since we didn't get them until very recently. But here's my point. Before you answer my question about the structure and bifurcating this application possibly, I believe I'm correct in that the revetment that was allowed by the zoning board at 157 took into account that the house was going to be moved back with a new sanitary system, correct? And that
however, okay, go ahead.
Let me finish. And that, I don't believe that has happened, because we don't have that revetment yet. And so, and again, that was, I'm sure they claimed that to be an emergency, just as this has been claimed an emergency for the last 13 or 15 years. And I'm just wondering what your response is. Why would this zoning board not want to compel the applicants to offer the same mitigation that those applicants offered in that determination, as far as moving the house back?
Happy to answer.
Okay, go ahead.
Happy to answer. So first, and it's again a perfectly understandable question, certainly. But there's a statement that was made a couple of times about bifurcation. There is no bifurcating of this application. Right now, there is no present intent to do anything to the house. Right now, the present intent is to protect the residents that exist there, and protect the property that still remains. I mean, if you look at the survey in the lot area, we're down to 33. We're down to 4,000 square feet, or just on, actually, if you include lot area, if you exclude the access easement, 3,300 square feet. So the present intent is to get this revetment similar, to have it connect to the revetment that exists, that will and has been approved, not exist for the Young and Lemieux property, to account for the fact that a revetment was approved by the town through a building permit, the town trustees, and the DEC for the Mulford POA property next door, and to not have this property sitting on an island with approved revetments on either side, where they're kind of bearing the brunt of the impact of that by not being adequately protected. But right now, there is no present intention of doing anything, so there's no bifurcation. But on the mitigation and the house, the Young and Lemieux property had room to move their house back. We don't have that room to do anything. There's the access easement behind the house where Young and Lemieux access their property. It's where the in part where the septic is going to go. There's nowhere to relocate this house to, so it's a form of mitigation that is simply not available to this applicant.
Well, as I said, Brian, there's the porch in the back that could be removed, and the house could also be on a smaller footprint, were it to be made a two-story structure, and perhaps also it's just a smaller house. So I think there are opportunities there, and as well, I imagine you're going to have to be tearing up that decking. That's a whole other thing, that the means and methods. But the front deck on the water side, and you want to tear that up to put in this revetment, and then you want us to give you permission to rebuild that decking overhanging the revetment. And so that's where I was going with that. So I think there are opportunities to do a design here. I think.
And also, Mr. Chairman, that I think we heard testimony from Aram earlier that the design for the revetment didn't take into effect anything with the house. It's more to protect the beach, not the house. And now we're hearing it's to protect the house. But if the house is woefully is much lower than the required FEMA elevation, it could be subject to wave action. I don't know how we're protecting the house.
I completely agree. I believe you're somewhere like about 6 or 7 feet below FEMA, Brian, and I'm just surprised that part of this application, if you really want to keep the existing house, wasn't to. And you talk about helical pilings. It's why it would not be intended to make the house be FEMA compliant. You want to comment on that?
Well, I think there's two things. I mean, I think there's a substantial cost there to not only undertake this revetment, a substantial cost, a financial component of either not demolishing and reconstructing a house, elevating the house, or doing some combination of the two. It's,
But you're putting new piling on anyway.
It may be cost prohibitive.
Are you intending on doing new piling under the house, Brian?
There is the application for the heliopiles. Alice, do you want to weigh in on that specifically?
Aaron prepared that plan, so if he wants to speak to that, he can.
And so I'm happy. Alan, do you want to weigh in on the piles really quickly?
Sure. Aram Tertunian, First Coastal, West Hampton. Just a clarification on Member Delane's comment that the revetment is solely to protect the property. No, it's both to protect the property and the house. Right now, as was clear in the photographs of the site that were shown, there's just a pile of rubble rocks there. That's not really a coherent structure that provides protection. So certainly the rock revetment is going to provide protection to the foundation of the house itself. Not as much, obviously, to the deck that's in front, and I think I addressed that in Member Brenneman's comments as well. As far as the foundation of the house goes, the objective now is to stabilize the property and stabilize the house, and the helical piles are intended just to do that. We saw the photographs that the chairman displayed on the screen, and you can see, clearly that there is a need to supplement some of the support members under the building in order to maintain a stable structure. So I think that, the project that we're proposing for the rock revetment and the stabilization of the foundation of the house are wholly consistent with each other, and they support each other.
But if you take a look, Aaron, with all due respect, if you take a look at your elevation drawing of the rock revetment, it actually goes underneath the deck and almost comes to the bottom of the deck. And I'm just wondering, if you got wave action on that thing, that structure is getting compromised. I just don't see it. You got to explain that. I don't know if you took wave action into consideration here.
Yes, we did, and I agree that that's going to be that could potentially be a problem. And I mentioned that in the direct question from Member Brenneman. That deck is going to take damage, but our alternative is to push the revetment seaward, which we got a no-go from the state, or to move the house landward, and there's nowhere to move the house.
Right. So my question then, if that's the case, from a safety standpoint, how are we protecting the house?
Well, because
I don't get it.
Because look at the cross section. The house is behind the revetment. That's how.
Yeah, but it's also 4 feet, not meeting FEMA. And I think you do have the ability to both raise the existing house and move it landward, perhaps 10, 12, 15 feet by removing that landward deck. So I think there are opportunities. I just think it's, as you know, in Southampton, and you all know, there's a certain, with FEMA in any town, it's the intent is when you're putting money into these properties that you meet FEMA, or you pick the house up and move it landward. And it just doesn't kind of make sense here. You're
If
doing
I
all
may,
this work.
just quickly.
Go ahead, Brian.
I mean, I think the documentation we put in, from the structural engineering report to Aaron's report, shows that certainly in our view we've demonstrated that this revetment does adequately protect the house and does adequately protect the property. I think, I understand having the discussions to say, could you do this, or raising it, would that protect it more? Certainly, but I think it does get a little bit, the applicant does have an ability, and in many ways an absolute right, to keep their residence and to protect that, and to seek to protect that residence. I don't think there's an obligation on them to propose a new residence in connection with this revetment. That is something the Lemieux property, had that ability to do that, but if you look back at the record of that, they were not given their revetment in exchange as a condition for moving the house. They were proposing to take a 1,200 square foot house, to knock it down, and to build a 1,700 square foot house in its place. That's the approval that was initially given. When the revetment was denied, because there was no adequate protection for this house. Then when they came back with a redesigned revetment, they still had the permit to reconstruct and rebuild a larger residence and to construct the revetment. It was a benefit that they were able to move it back, but it was not a condition that we'll give you this revetment if you knock your house down and move it back and build it bigger. That's what they sought to do in that application. Our applicant is not seeking to knock down and to rebuild this house, and I don't think I understand the discussion. Would it be better? Could this be preferable? And maybe those are discussions worth having, but from a legal standpoint and a property rights standpoint, if the revetment if we have the record demonstrating that this revetment is necessary, which we think is unquestioned, that this protects the house, which we've submitted expert reports that it does, there's no obligation that the applicant instead propose to knock, that the applicant has an obligation to do something different with the existing residence. They have an ability to protect what their residence is.
And Brian, with all due respect, I'm still struggling with the fact that the legal responsibility, the legal argument is the fact that hard structures are prohibited in Zone 2. So I'm struggling with this whole concept that the owner has a right to have this revetment.
And I'll just add this.
Well, they do have, subject to meeting the town code variance provisions. Now remember, the Lemieux property applied for and obtained this exact same variance for essentially the exact same reasons that we are faced with here, given the chronic rate of erosion and the need and the right to protect their property. So the precedent is there. The findings that were made by the board were judicially affirmed, and they've been affirmed every time that building permit's been issued and renewed. So those findings, all of which are set forth in the Lemieux determination, all of which are set forth in our memorandum of law, as to why that property met the variance standards, apply with equal force here. The law is very clear, as again, it's laid out, and your counsel will tell you, there's agency precedent. In order to you have a revetment that was granted a variance in Zone 2 for a hard structure on a nearly identical, on a neighboring property, unless the board is able to show that there was some kind of change in law, which has not occurred, or some kind of change in circumstances to vary from that precedent from one property to the neighboring property, particularly given that the planning department preferred that there be a joint revetment for these two properties, particularly when the Lemieux property, a significant component of the approval given to them was that there was this existing revetment, quote unquote, that exists in front of our property now that was never permitted, was put in, and for all intents and purposes, we have to act today as though it's not there because we're under a DEC order to remove it. All of those reasons work towards why we're also entitled to that same relief. If anything,
Brian,
the change in
Brian.
circumstances and the increased erosion from then till now, mandate following that same precedent.
Okay, Nancy Lynn, go ahead, Nancy Lynn.
Brian, since you called on me to assure the board that what you're saying is true, I would take some exception here. I believe the questions that the board is asking you go to how these are different conditions. If they were identical conditions, I would agree with you that there is a precedent, but it seems to me the board is asking you to explain why these are not differences between that decision, their previous decision, and this one, when the house is differently situated. So you want to explain that, that's fine, but I believe that that's what the board is asking you to explain.
I think Brian, before you jump into that, I'm going to take a pause here and let Brian from the planning department present some speak, and then we can circle back to this. And thank you, Nancy Lynn.
Mm-hmm.
So Brian, would you go ahead, please? Brian Frank.
I'm sorry, board members. Are you asking me to start my presentation?
Yeah, yes, please. We kind of got waylaid, and I think it would be nice if you could do your presentation, and then we can all circle back in with you joining the conversation. So go ahead, Brian, please. Brian Frank.
Okay. Let me just zoom out on a couple of things, or maybe instead of starting in the beginning, let me start where Brian Matthews left off, because with all due respect to Brian, the planning department strenuously objected to the Young application, and I think it's very inaccurate to say that maybe I misunderstood, maybe it's the Zoom format, but the idea that the first application was denied because the revetment didn't span the Young property and what was then the Clink property is not accurate. I'd have to review my own work, but I was the analyst who reviewed that application. I was at that hearing, and we make recommendations to the board, and the board makes the decisions, and we have to respect the decisions that the board made. But I have to tell you that I think time has borne it out that the Young approval was one of the most deeply flawed decisions that the zoning board has made in my time working with them for a couple of reasons. Number one, they basically determined that a house that wasn't even built yet was in imminent peril. And you're really not supposed to allow an erosion control structure unless a building is in imminent peril and there are no other alternatives. With regard to imminent peril, because it's been brought up on this property as well, in that application, two licensed, respected local engineers who know East Hampton well both found that the Young house was in imminent peril from coastal erosion. That was 8 years ago. That was prior to Hurricane Sandy or Superstorm Sandy or Sandy, or however you like to label that storm. It was 8 years ago. We've had Sandy since then. We've had a lot of coastal events since then, which I don't say that to impugn the analysis of the engineers, but I do want to point out how deeply flawed, subjective, and imprecise characterizing anything as imminent peril is or can be, especially for a licensed engineer who is putting a stamp and seal on something attesting to the vulnerability of the situation. The first Young decision was denied because of its failure to address the return on the eastern property boundary, and the revision stepped it back. But the characterization that the planning, if it was suggested that the planning department wanted to see that revetment wrap around both properties, I don't think you'll find that reflected anywhere in the Young record. So with that said, and we can discuss it, and I will bring the Young plans back up, but I do want to just kind of walk through where we've been on the property to To date, these are in your files. This is what was used to determine the erosion analysis. This is the Young and the what's now the 153 Mulford property in 2001. You can see where the dune crest was. You can see that where the house that is in Napeague Bay now essentially was at that time in 2001. This is the coastal erosion hazard line. I'm sorry that relic is on this aerial. This is 2018, and you could see the amount of recession, the line that was used to approximate that 50-foot plus loss there. So there's no question that there has been an erosion problem here. Has it accelerated? Since 2012, I think that was suggested. I doubt that. It's probably been more episodic since then. What it certainly hasn't done is accelerated since the owner bought it, and I think that was one finding that the board made in the Young property, and that might be attributed to that December nor'easter, what's called the Christmas storm, the December 26th storm of 2010. I do want to point out, since we've been speaking about Young a lot, that nobody who was on the board at that time is currently a board member, and there is an additional body of knowledge. There's more time to see how that decision has borne out or not borne out. Nothing has happened on the Young property except the construction of some structures without permits and unauthorized clearing. I'll show you the, see if I can do this without, well, I wanted to blow this up a little. This is the oblique aerial image of the property, and this is from 2018, and you can see the Mulford Road Homeowners Association revetment that was allowed to protect the community well, and that's why it was approved. This armor here is really of an indeterminate source. It's not really, it wasn't really part of the Mulford Lane revetment that I can tell, but it is part of the history of the haphazard erosion management of this property. In Chairman Whelan's photo, you could see some of the sandbags that are still there. They've broken up. There's been plastic in the bay. They've been strewn all over the place prior to this owner's property, but the erosion has been poorly managed in this area for a long time, respectfully offered. I do want to remind the board that this is an unlisted action pursuant to SECRA, and the board is entitled to make a SECRA declaration. The review was non-coordinated because the DEC issued a permit. The arbor above the deck and some of the other structures on the western part of the property were constructed without permits, and the sooner that they are removed, quite frankly, the better. The applicant indicated in some earlier correspondence that they're not seeking to legalize any of the structures that were built without approvals, and that's commendable. In my opinion, they'd be weak candidates for variances, built without permits, needing side yard variances, seaward of the dune, big wetland variances, so I think that was a wise choice. And although a building permit was issued last year to install the helical pilings, and I met with Aram's partner, Billy Mack, on site. The principal of 153 was there at the time. They seemed very anxious to install those helical piles. The building department issued that building permit almost a year ago, not quite, and I believe it was in October. It still hasn't been acted on, and instead the applicant has chosen to kind of shore up the foundation and the deck using 4x4s in probably a manner that is really less than any building code in the velocity zone would call for. And I do think it's important, as you discuss the variance standards here, that the erosion at this property far predates the owner's acquisition of this property, and You know, I actually agree with the way Brian articulated it. The fact a self-created variance is not by itself disqualifying for that variance, but it is absolutely something that the board is entitled to take into consideration here as to in what extent this practical difficulty is self-created and what the alternatives are. One of the things that I think the board needs to evaluate in this application is the feasibility of installing the revetment as it's been proposed and the viability of any alternatives. Ironically, in 2012, the planning department encouraged the Young property and the board to look at geocubes as an alternative to the revetment. And I think that, you know, considering that we have a geocube revetment just a few hundred feet away to the west, I think a combination of the helical pilings and the geocubes is something that should have been addressed by the board. And then getting to some of the issues that have been discussed before, coming back to the revetment plans. Let's remember that to construct this revetment as it's been designed, you are excavating in the littoral zone. There were submissions from both First Coastal and I believe Matthews and Cooley, and if I'm wrong about the latter, I apologize, that the revetment is landward of mean high water. And if that's true for part of the month. If you take a look at the survey that we were looking at earlier, you'll see that the mean high water line that was used to design this project was identified on a specific date, and I think it was October of 2018. And if you've been to this property on multiple visits, I'm sure it does not take extraordinary circumstances or a full or new moon to see water under the deck. So to be generous, it's mean high water adjacent, but at times of the month, it's clearly seaward of apparent high water. It does involve excavation of the littoral zone to install rocks of 5 tonnage. There was a statement made by, I believe it was First Coastal, that it's compatible with the neighborhood because there are similar revetments in the area. There's no 5-ton and 3 to 4 ton armor stone revetments here. The rubble mound revetment may have some larger stones in it, but in general, those storms are much smaller. They're not organized. I don't even know if they're on top of filter fabric. I haven't seen any filter fabric underneath. Maybe they are because they don't seem to have sunk much, but there is certainly no structure in the neighborhood like the one that's designed here. To say that it's compatible because there's some rocks nearby it's not accurate. There are still questions of how this sand fill is going to be placed under the house. There's not really this much room there. And, when you go to the plan view again, we're talking about, at best, 10 feet between the wall of the house and the western property line. It's vegetated now, so it has to be cleared, obviously. This sand fill is not going to last more than a couple of tidal cycles.
Brian, hold on. Can somebody mute? There's a lot of noise there. Is everyone on mute? Could everyone put their things on mute Okay, go ahead. Thanks, Brian.
Sure. As I was saying, this fill material isn't going to be there very long. I'm not suggesting it shouldn't be there. Adding sand to the system is arguably always a good thing, but as we learned from the sandbag revetments a few hundred feet away, it's impossible to maintain any sand cover over this. And I think both the chairman and member Deline made very salient points about how is it possible that wave run-up or wave deflection bouncing off of these rocks aren't going to dislodge that deck and create a hazard either for the 153 Mulford property, the Young property, or even the house that amazingly is still standing in Gardner's Bay. These are all questions that I think need a better job answering. We don't live in a paper world, and it's one thing to draw things up on paper and to draw plans, but what you're talking about here, as Brian Matthews mentioned earlier, is a property with a total lot area of a little over 4,000 square feet. That's it. it is low. Even the higher elevations of the property are low. I'm going to come to the Young plan in a moment, but we know that flooding comes down Mulford Avenue. We know that there's a wetland very, very close to the Young existing house and the approved house, which, again, I think, in my opinion, again, speaks to the shortcomings of that board's analysis of that property. And the suggestion that this is going to solve a problem has really still a long way to go to be established. I do want to point out I do want to bring up the Young property again, because we've discussed it a lot, and I think there was a suggestion that maybe the Young house didn't need to be demolished to build the revetment. This is the existing residence. This is the Young property here, and this is the Young house. This is the footprint of the revetment and the hatched area here. This is the eastern return along the property line. This is the western return. This is the wetland. As waves run out of area where they can run up, they are going to inundate this wetland more than they have in the past, and I think we've already seen that with the sandbag revetments at Bayview. And we see this wetland extends far, a pretty decent distance south of the road end properties here. I don't know what this is really solving, but I think these are still questions that the applicant should be answering, both in terms of the feasibility of being able to construct the revetment in an extraordinarily constrained footprint. Again, you've got a driveway that serves the neighbor to the south. I think it's great that they want to abandon a cesspool that is obviously in groundwater, bay water, if you want to call it that, and the installation of an IA back here. But the foundation is clearly in disrepair. The revetment at its highest elevation is still going to be several feet below the minimum first floor elevation identified by FEMA. A lot of people think that the FEMA data is inadequate to begin with because it's based on historic flooding and not future flooding. One of the answers in the submission from last week was that it does have a reasonable chance of controlling erosion for the next 30 years. And I don't know how you come to that conclusion if you've got a structure that's already designed lower than the FEMA height, and we know that sea level is rising. We can debate about how rapidly it's going to rise, but I don't think anybody debates that it is rising, and that elevation could be higher or will be higher in 5 years than it is now. It's just a matter of how.
So Brian, could I jump in and ask you just to comment on this? A couple of things here. First of all, the Young and Lemieux property, as you say, nothing's happened, but they've done some illegal clearing and illegal construction. We don't really know if this is ever going to be built, for one thing. They're revetment, right? And the other thing is, I'd like you, with regard to my point about putting the money into making this house FEMA compliant, and if the application were to do some sort of a coastal management and pull it back further, no matter what methodology that may be, considering that the Lemieux application may never be constructed. I wonder if you could just talk about the public access along here, if you would.
Well, it's minimal. Let me go to a better shot. So I can't really blow up that oblique aerial, but I can use this image here. And I apologize for the typo saying it was from 2011. Clearly, this is the 2018 aerial as labeled by pictometry.
Thank you.
But, the public access is at best limited. It's certainly not suitable for all people. You really need a falling or dead low tide to pass safely here. And, you're either getting off at Bayview. Well, you can't get off at Bayview now because the road is blocked by 6 feet high sandbags. But then you better get back to Mulford before the tide comes in. With the stones here, and I've got plenty of photos of water underneath the young deck. The public access is really limited, and it's a shame because there is state park land to the west where there is a nice beach, and it really is inaccessible to the public, including the people that live on Mulford Lane that are really relegated to this small area to the east of the rubble mound revetment, or seaward of the rubble mound revetment.
Right. Thank you, Brian. Board member Brian, did you want to continue, or are there any questions, board members, for Brian?
I have two questions for Brian, or one maybe. Brian, on the applicant's memorandum, on argument number 1, it's actually on page 8. There's a paragraph, 2 paragraphs, 3 and 4, which would be on the 4th one would be on page 9. Said the applicants experts have deemed that the revetment to be the best means to preserve the structure. The loss of the house is probable. And once a revetment is constructed at the Young and Lemieux property, revetment to the west, the loss of the house will be imminent. And then on number 4, it says the proposed revetment will not interfere with literal transport of sand. Is this, I'm trying to understand, what is your intent? It looks like these are 2 conflicting statements.
I'm sorry, which submission is that? Is that the...
That's the memorandum, on the memorandum. I don't know.
The memorandum of law or First Coastal submission?
The memorandum of law.
Okay.
Page 8 and 9. Will the proposed revetment not interfere with the literal transport of sand? Number 1.
Well, anytime you introduce a hard structure to the... when you introduce a hard structure, you're interfering with littoral processes. You are going to have wave reflection off the revetment. To be honest, I don't know how much sand is moving past here anymore. And I don't have enough images to kind of tell you what the, or surveys to tell you what the erosion rate has done over the last couple of years. And it's compounded by the fact that, basically the dune is behind the Young house now. And for all intents and purposes, under the 153 Mulford LLC house. So how much sediment is moving in the system is questionable. We do expect that this is a deficient area. There is distinct indentation, a scalloping, a scouring of the shoreline on the beaches to the east of this property. And the groin field that really predates modern zoning, all at Old Lazy Point, is suspected of having a significant role in interfering with sediment transport in this area. So it's hard to quantify what the revetments will do to, for me anyway, with the information I have, to tell you what the revetments will do to sediment transport here.
Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Brian. Board members, any other questions for Brian? Frank? No? Okay. Any questions for, any Aram or the attorneys, Brian and Alice? Okay. Brian or Alice or Aram, do you have any comments you want to kind of wrap up with here?
Yeah, I'm not seeing Aram up on our screen here anymore, so I'm trying to figure out if his connection got cut or what have you, but I'm happy to address a number of those things that Brian stated in his, extensive presentation. So, the first, and again, this is something that's been brought up throughout, the question of imminent peril. And one of the statements that Brian Frank made was when in putting forth his disagreement, respectfully, with the approval that was granted to Young and Lemieux. And where he said that it was inappropriate, I believe, I don't want to misquote, for that board at the time to make a finding that a house that had yet to be that had yet been constructed to be in an imminent peril. And I can understand that concept and perhaps even agree with it. However, that's not the situation that's presented to the board here. The situation that's been presented to the board here is not theoretical, actual residence that exists, and we have a structural engineer from Southampton, is eminently familiar with the area in Long Island, saying that this house is in imminent peril and faces an immediate threat. We have a finding, we have, going back to the emergency permits previously, including emergency permits recently issued by the town's building inspector. If you look at section 255-429B of the town code, a condition precedent to the building inspector issuing such an emergency permit is a finding that the house, the structure, is in imminent peril. So I think that question's been answered, and I think that question's been answered in the affirmative about whether or not this house faces an imminent threat.
So, Brian, let me jump in. Brian, let me just jump in before you move onward with that. You talk about the structural engineer. Did the structural engineer recommend that to keep this house out of imminent danger, that it be raised, helical piles be raised to make it FEMA compliant? And if this was raised to make this house FEMA compliant, would you see this as being in imminent danger, this house? I mean, it's been sitting like this for
I think that it would, Your Honor, Mr. Chairman. It's the proximity to the coastline and the proximity to the wave action that principally serves to make this house, render this house to be in imminent danger. But I think we keep, if I may, getting sidetracked about an application that's not proposing to do anything to the residents, nor is there an obligation to do anything to the residents. The alternatives that the code talks about is not moving your home, not rebuilding your home. The alternatives to the hard structure that the code refers to are soft solutions, sandbags, geotubes, and there's ample evidence in the record and expert statements in the record showing that neither of those would be appropriate or useful. In fact, if I recall, as part of his discussion, Brian Frank himself stated that, just putting fill here, just putting sand here, that won't last. So that is not a long-term solution, which is what the applicant has a right to seek to do, to have a long-term solution that doesn't have to constantly be redone to protect the house that they have right now. There is no obligation for them to rebuild, remove, or do anything other than seek to protect the structure that they have.
But Brian, isn't the intent of that part of the code, especially when it comes to the sandbag revetment, it's temporary in nature, and the reason why it's temporary, what's the intent of it, so that there could be other solutions pursued to deal with the more permanent solution on the property.
Other solutions feasible for a property owner to pursue. And Aaron, do you want to address that, the lack of feasibility or reasonableness, for lack of a better way to put it, of undertaking any of these other soft solutions aside from a hardened structure in front of this property?
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity. So, listen, I understand, that this is a difficult case and a difficult decision for the board. I appreciate that, that you guys are asking pointed questions. I think that's appropriate and important. But the reality of the situation is that we're faced with very few options here. We have a high energy environment. We have a chronic erosion rate as described. And there really is no other solution other than a hard solution, or to do what was done on the house that's seaward of this house right now and sitting out in the bay. And I, for one, and I hope all of us on this in this meeting together agree that that's not a good solution. Basically, to let the house, be the land to be eroded from under the house and the house to be sitting out in the bay. I personally think that's a bad solution, and I would not support that solution. So then we're left with, well, how do we do this with soft measures? Can we supply sand to this system in a manner and that is both protective and economic? And the answer is no on both fronts. There's a history of attempting to put sand on these beaches on individual properties, and it just fails within months. That is a simple fact. It is inescapable. It's unfortunate, but it's real. The next question is, well, can we just escalate up a little bit to geotextiles? Well, yeah, we can, but I'm the guy who builds the geotextiles, and I'm telling you, they are an interim measure. They are not a permanent measure. They're not designed to be a permanent measure. They cannot work as a permanent measure. They will last a couple of years, maybe up to 5 years. You've got intense wave attack. It's going to be exposed to the sun. You've got rocks that are in the system right now that are going to be banging into it and cutting it. Geotextiles are not going to work in this scenario. So we're left with the deeply, this is a serious situation that requires a serious solution. Merely elevating the building on pilings does not solve the problem. You simply end up with another, whatever the address of that one out there in the middle of the bay is, you end up with that. If you just elevate the house, that's what you end up with, another house sitting out in the bay. I can't support that. I don't think that's responsible. I don't think it's effective, and it's not something that I would recommend. And I've provided for this board a very detailed coastal energy analysis of the types of the storms that you're looking at here, and that is precisely why we've come up with the solution. If we could do it a different way, I would do it a different way. I simply don't believe that there is a better way to do it than the one that we have proposed.
Aaron, can I ask you to address quickly, because I wasn't sure if when you had cut out or what have you, but Roy had asked a couple of questions about the literal transport of sand. Can you just address that issue and whether or not this would have this proposed revetment would have an impact on that?
Yes. My opinion is that it will not have a significant impact on littoral drift of the sand, and I would agree with Brian on two fronts. Number one, the material that's there on the beach now is very coarse. I mean, you go down there, yes, there's some sand in the summertime, but for 10 months out of the year, that's a cobble beach with everything from pebbles all the way up to boulders. So there's not a lot of sand moving in that system to begin with. And the material that is there, I don't believe is going to be significantly impacted by a rock revetment that, quite frankly, is going to be very similar in feel and texture to what you're looking at right now. It's just going to be better organized. It's going to allow the land behind it to be more solid. And it's going to last, a lot longer because it's going to be constructed using, modern, accepted, engineering and building principles. So I would agree with Brian on that.
Okay, Mike, do we have anyone in the public on the line here? Mike from LTV?
No, John. No, we do not.
Okay. Before we close out, board members, any questions, comments, or?
For me.
Okay, so I think I will make a motion then with regard to 153 Mulford Associates LLC at 153 Mulford Lane in Amagansett, tax map 300-84-2-5, to close the public hearing, and the written record will remain open until 2 weeks after the transcript of this meeting is posted on the town website.
Second.
Concur.
Terry, you there?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was on mute. Concur.
Thank you. Okay, thank you, Brian, for your work on this, and thank you to the applicants and
Thank you all, yeah.
consultants.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and the board. Have a good evening.
You too.
You too.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Stay well.
Okay, board members, we'll move along here. We have, let's see, we go to our extensions of time. Let's start off with Kathleen O'Sullivan at 1936 Montauk Highway. I don't know if Eleni or Brian, Eleni, are you there, or Tyler? Is someone there, Tyler, who wants to just refresh us? I think this has to do with the house was demolished, and is anyone there?
Hey, Mr. Chairman, it's Brian Frank. I spoke to Tyler earlier. He didn't write anything up, but he did convey that the O'Sullivan property is really at the end of their first zoning board approval. You know, the initial approval is good for 3 years, and then it's a year at a time after that. So they're 3 years into their approval. The improvements that were authorized in that approval are under construction, and there really doesn't appear to be any reason to not extend the permit for a year.
Right. Thank you, Brian. I believe this may be in my. I spoke with Tyler as well on this. Is this Amagansett, Brian? Do you know at 1936, or is it Terry? Is it in your?
Yes, I believe it's. I believe it's Amagansett.
Yeah. Okay. I'm fine with this. Board members, please comment.
Yeah, I am also. I also spoke to Tyler today.
I'm fine with it too.
Thank you. Tim as well. Okay, thank you. I'll make a motion with regard to Kathleen O'Sullivan at 1936 Montauk Highway in Amagansett to have the extension of time resolution drafted or approved. I guess we're just
Second.
Concur.
Council, that's how we do that, right? We're just getting it drafted, then we'll approve it next week or next meeting, Council?
It gets drafted and then you approve it by signing it. So there's no need to actually have a motion. You've approved it and now it will be written for your signature.
Right, thank you.
Oh,
Now, the next one is a little bit different. This is also in my Amagansett. This is Richard Priori Sr. at 266 Cranberry Hole Road, Amagansett. Tax map 300-128-1-8.3. This one, I believe, Brian, this one we do have written up. And Brian, would you just remind us? I went by the site today. I think they're just closing out a C of O, correct, Brian? Frank?
That's correct. The construction has been completed for a while. The planning department had inspected the property earlier in the beginning of June for compliance with the conditions of approval. We had thought at the time that we would be issuing an administrative extension of time to allow them to get a certificate of occupancy, and it wasn't until a closer review of the file indicated that the approval came from the board, and consequently the extension needs to come from the board as well.
Right. Thank you, Brian. So again, I'm fine with approving this, and we'll. Board members, could you comment?
Same here.
Fine with it.
I'm good.
Okay, thank you. So board members, this has already been drafted, so I think there might be a time constraint. So if you could please stop by the planning, Brittany, maybe we'll leave these in Nancy Lynn's box as we did, so we can sign these. And again, it would be appreciated, board members, if you could swing by and sign these.
Yes, I've already drafted it. We'll print it in the morning.
Great, and we'll leave it in Nancy Lynn's box, please.
Correct, and it's in that folder that's labeled extensions.
Right, thank you, Brittany.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now we have David Peskin, and this is at 84 Hampton Lane in Amagansett, tax map number 300-176-7-17, and this was the original ZBA determination in April 13th, 2016. An extension of time has been requested to obtain a building permit. I believe, board members, you all remember this. This was a pool that was once denied, was relocated, and then unfortunately was constructed in the wrong area, and then we approved it being, moved to the right area. And Brian, I believe they're trying to get this squared away, correct? It's Brian Frank to get the building permit.
That wasn't me.
I think that was one of the board members who was annoyed.
I'm not as familiar with the details of Peskin. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think that was it. I spoke to, so I'm going to go ahead. If I'm fine with this as well. Board members, are you okay with this as well?
Yes, I am also.
Yes, I am.
Tim, you good?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, with regard to David Peskin at 84 Hampton Lane, Amagansett, I make a motion to approve. We don't have to make a motion, but we all approve this. So this will get written up for next time. Okay, moving along. Possible admins, we do not have any. Brian Frank, is that correct this week?
Correct.
Okay, good. Okay, so now we'll move on to board determinations. And this is regarding pressure equalization module erosion control. And it's regarding as well the interpretation by the board under the East Hampton Town Code 255-8-30A3 as to whether a pressure equalization module is an erosion control structure under the definitions in Chapter 255 of the code. And this is a new device. Board members, as Brian recommended, there was one applicant. This was discussed in front of the trustees, and I recommend I'm going to go back and take a look at that myself. But we've asked Brian just to kind of give us a little bit of a tutorial, as this is really a new thing in the town. And Brian thank you, Brian, for sending all this information to the board members, which he did, which we are all looking at. And what I'm hoping is that Brian can kind of just give us a summary of this system. And then at our next meeting, we will give our determination on whether or not this should be considered an erosion control structure or not. Is that correct, Nancy Lynn, the way I summarized that? Nancy
Yes,
Lynn?
we are. Yeah, we just have to get the interpretation of this, and Brian's going to give you the pose the question with a little bit more detail with regards to what definitions they're asking the board to look into.
Right, and we don't have to make that determination this evening, correct, Nancy Lynn?
No, you don't. No, you can make that today, or you can have further discussion at our work session next week.
Yeah, so I'm going to recommend that we do that. But Brian, if you would, please go ahead, and thank you for your efforts here, Brian.
Sure. maybe a little bit timely. We've been talking about Coastal Erosion Overlay District Zone 2 a lot.
Yeah.
And the town code regulates erosion control structures based on what coastal erosion overlay zone they're in. And those coastal erosion overlay zones developed from the recommendations of the local waterfront revitalization plan, and they characterize the shoreline based on the presence or absence largely of erosion control structures. So you'll find that coastal erosion, I'm paraphrasing, but coastal erosion overlay district zone 2 are bayfront beaches that are predominantly free of erosion control structures. There is an attempt at erosion control that is called a pressure equalization module. And I don't have really good generic plans for them. I have a little bit here that I'll show you. But the question for the board is, are these modules better characterized as an erosion control structure or as part of a coastal restoration project? So what these structures or devices are basically plastic pipes, and I'm sure the proprietor is going to hate the way I characterize these, but I'm gonna keep it simple. The concept is that plastic pipes are installed below the surface of the beach to facilitate the more rapid vertical dissipation of water, so that when a wave runs up on the beach, these plastic modules will let the water drop vertically, and sand in suspension in that wave will drop it on the beach as opposed to carry it back offshore. So in a memorandum that I prepared last week, I provided you some information about what Coastal Erosion Zone 2 is. and I provided you with the definition of a coastal restoration project. And what we think that what the planning department's opinion is that this is better characterized as a coastal restoration project or part of one than an erosion structure. So a coastal restoration project is defined in the town code as the deposit of sand or soils on a beach dune or face of a bluff in order to restore or replace similar material lost to erosion, stabilization of such material by planting beach vegetation. And this definition shall include the installation of snow fencing or permeable mesh fencing, the placement of biodegradable fabric mesh or biodegradable gels, and the installation of drains and pipes for the control of water runoff if these devices are designed and used to allow vegetation to grow upon and stabilize the deposited materials. In what is an embarrassing oversight on my part, I gave you the definition of a coastal structure in the memorandum, but didn't provide you the definition of a coastal erosion structure, and I apologize for that, and I hope that's my boneheaded move of the year. But an erosion control structure is defined as a structure sited in or under any body of water or on or any near any shoreline, wetland, beach, or bluff adjacent thereto, which is designed to reduce, retard, or prevent erosion of the shoreline or the silting filling of natural or dredged harbor or channel. Definition shall be deemed to include all groins, jetties, seawalls, revetments, bulkheads, breakwaters, gabions, and riprap, as well as other man-made fabrication devices, including geotextile tubes or sandbags. And obviously that was a big focus of the LWRP, was the recognition that structures like this, which are often lumped together as hard structures, often result in a loss of both the natural resources and public access. So the pressure equalization module, again, are these tubes. Let me get to the plan. Again, I apologize that the specs that I have are pretty limited. This is an example of a pressure equalization module being installed in Florida. There's a screen on top, and they're installed in rows anywhere between 1 and 3 feet below the surface of the beach. Nope, don't freeze up. So this is an illustration of what one looks like, and this is a plan view of how they're installed on the beach. So if you did have an application for these structures, it is incumbent to know whether they require a variance or not, so that any application can be properly noticed. In a draft environmental assessment prepared for specific applications, the planning department has offered its opinion and kind of built on that a little bit here in this memorandum. But that determination would really need to come from the zoning board as to whether it's an erosion control structure or not, whether you consider it as part of a coastal restoration project or not. I think, and you know, please, Nancy Lynn, if I'm misspeaking, correct me, but really the bottom line question is it an erosion control structure that requires a variance from the regulations of the Coastal Erosion Overlay District regulations?
Mm-hmm.
Brian, on the PEMs, isn't it the resultant of the PEMs to have beach accretion and
Yes.
accretion? So therefore, would it not then be better, because that does fall into the definition of restoration, no? Or you're depositing sand, or you're bringing in sand. I mean, that's a gray. I'm not sure, but that's a question more than a statement.
Right, and whether it's successful or not is a related but maybe a different question. I think we've offered the opinion in discussing it internally in the planning department that it is better characterized as part of a coastal restoration than an erosion control structure, a hard structure which requires a variance from the code. They're installed below the surface. Generally, vegetation doesn't grow on them because they're going to be on the beach. I guess the beach would have to build up a lot, and the dune could start creeping forward if it worked the way they were designed. But they certainly don't preclude the growth of vegetation. They don't obstruct it the way a wall or a rock revetment would.
So, Brian, it's interesting, that diagram. I'm curious, why does it show them 300 feet apart in that diagram right there?
This is the horizontal spacing, and that may not be the case. This is an excerpt from EcoShore's report, and if there were more to the report, you would see that the both the horizontal spacing, the length along the beach, the distance between them can be modified, as well as the distance between each individual unit. So this generic plan shows rows where the modules are 30 feet apart and spaced out 300 feet apart. Maybe this is how this was done for a project in Florida. I will tell you that in an application you don't have this spacing. It's a much tighter. This row is much tighter.
And the idea again is this screen on that little detail of the cap over the PVC PEM. The idea is the water is getting out and the sand is filtering through that screen into the PEM. Is that correct?
No, the sand will stay on top of the beach. The screen keeps sand out. So the idea is that the water is going to vertically dissipate.
Oh, okay. I was totally confused. I said now exactly. Sorry, I misspoke there. Yes, exactly. And therefore
limiting the amount of sand that is coming back. But they actually say that with the beach, with the wave motion, it actually brings sand in. But that's where the accretion comes in. Brian, correct me if I'm wrong. I watched I've studied this a little bit, and I watched the trustees meeting too. It was very interesting stuff.
Also, it was interesting, but I had somewhat bothersome as to why they didn't go forward after the 3-year trial. They said it was because of a change in political person, but I don't know. But anyway, I had a different take on it, Brian. I kind of see it as a coastal erosion control structure because it is plastic pipe that they're burying underneath the surface and not adding sand. So, from my first go round of looking at it.
So, well, I think we should all, if Brian has any other comments, and again, Brian has sent us this information, and we can review again the trustees meeting, and then discuss this more next week.
Yeah,
so
Brian, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Terry.
No, this document, did you send us this document? I know I probably asked you that already. This large document?
This one, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. This is an excerpt of a couple of pages. I'll check the size of it. If I could email it to you, I will. I will send you the whole report. Sure.
Yeah, I watched the trustee meeting. I don't know. I think I came away with more questions. But anyway, yeah, if you could.
Yeah. So Brian, I guess the planning department is just looking at this. It's all new to all of us, but. Do you foresee any, do you all look at this with a positive eye as far as?
Well, I don't really want to discuss an application without it being a hearing for the application. So I'm trying to keep it, a kind of a ball or a strike. Is this fish or foul? And that's,
right.
I've given you the code information that I hope is helpful in making a decision.
Yeah.
But details beyond that are better discussed in the context of the actual applications.
The public hearing. I agree and understand. Thank you. Okay, board members, any questions for Brian on this issue?
Now, to continue the analogy, the ball is right on the corner, so we'll have to make the judgment.
Correct. You have to make a call.
Right. Okay, so let's put this on the agenda for our next meeting, our next work session, and then we can all we'll go around the board and then we'll come to a determination here. So thank you for your work on that, Brian. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
We'll move along. We have the minutes, board members from June. 16th, and June 23rd, 2020. I have read these. We're working on some graphic and some issues as far as just formatting, but they looked otherwise when they were
I think,
live.
yeah.
Go
I
ahead,
think
Terry.
I think the pertinent information looked correct on it.
Right.
Aside from those cosmetic things, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Terry, do you want to make a motion to approve these, or you, if you please?
Okay, so, I'd like to make a motion to approve the East Hampton Town Zoning Board of Appeals minutes for June 16th and June 23rd, 2020.
Second.
Right.
Concur, sorry.
And I concur as well. Thank you, Terry. Okay, board members, now we'll move on to resolutions. And just to remind you all that these were all resolutions, extensions of time that we all approved last week. And they've all been written up and are ready for us to sign. We have Evan Levine, Serena Altschul, Jonathan Schlaffer, and Michael Bottini. Council, can I make a motion to approve all of these together, Council?
You can, but it's since you actually sign them, that's how you approve them. The other ones we do an approval on the record because there is no signature on the resolutions.
Mm-hmm.
But since you actually come in and extension times are actually individually signed by each of you, that's actually your approval on those.
Okay.
So we're good.
So you're good. You don't have to make a motion now. It's a little bit different than the resolutions and determinations that don't have signatures on them. Those actually have to have a motion. But these, once you've made the decision at the prior meeting, then you just will, if there's any changes, now would be a good time to discuss it, but you've all seen them. If you're good with that, then you just need to come in and sign them.
Okay. Thank you, Nancy Lynn. And thank you, board members, for stopping in and doing that. I believe Council, go ahead, Terry. Do you have anything? No.
No.
Council, do you have anything? I believe that.
I think Brittany
wants to say something.
Oh, go ahead, Brittany.
No, I just wanted to say that the extensions of time that you just approved tonight, along with the resolutions that I printed out that are now in the office, those will all be ready for you tomorrow morning
Okay, thank you, Brittany.
to make things easier.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, board members, thank you all. I think, Vice Chair, we might need a final motion from you, if you please.
Sure, therefore, Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to close the Town of East Hampton Zoning Board of Appeals hearing for July 7th, 2020 at 9:31 p.m.
Second.
Concur.
And I concur. Thank you, Roy. Thank you all. Brittany, Nancy Lynn, Brian, Planning Department.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you.
All good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Take care.